I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do roll call attendance, please, Marty?
Sure. Mary Jo Rosnowski.
Here.
Mary Jo Radcliffe. Here. Patty Jacobson. Here. Troy Webb. Excused, I heard from him. Amy Huffman. Here. Ann Beamer. Here. Scott Barton.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Has the meeting been notified to the public according to open meeting laws?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. We have our administration participating tonight through streaming or questions, if they're available to answer any questions throughout the meeting that you may have. We are now at public comment. Is there anything from the public that's not on the agenda? Okay, we'll move on to community engagement. Max Hart will be joining us later for his commendation on Kids for Kids.
Before we go further, if I could just highlight community engagement. Our food service program was recognized. I don't know if you noticed that picture that was in there. Our town of 3,471 residents were served 236,114 meals during the COVID emergency period. And so when you consider that, she was on the front page of the newsletter for nutrition services. And so good for Connie. She really continues to think outside of the box and to work really hard. They've started their Wednesday food pickup for our virtual learners and just really continuing to do great work. So we're really proud of her.
Yeah, that is exceptional. We have no gifts and grants at this time. Was requested to review the school resource officer contract. And we'll start with just you explaining what goes on.
Sure.
And how that
changed. Kyle Nosbush continues to serve in this role, and his time is split between the Alma Center School District, Alma Center, Humbert, Maryland, and Melrose, Mindoro, and Black River Falls. And he really has done a lot of, the three districts are working more closely together now than we probably ever have, and part of that is COVID, but part of it is because prior to COVID, Kyle really tried hard to connect us with our vocabulary and with our processes, and he just really brings a nice perspective to things, and so I appreciate that a great deal. And so he continues to split his time between the three districts. He does not go on a predictable schedule. He kind of divides his days into halvesies, and so he will spend half of one day in one district and half of another day in another district, but it's not always the same day each week because that's not where trouble lies. Trouble is a little bit more random, and so that's what he does with his schedule. Kyle is always willing to reach out and what can I do to be helpful? When we were closed, is there things that I can do? This fall, we've leaned on Kyle for some of our families that have not engaged at all. We've had him go, we start with the teachers calling, the principal calling, and then the social worker going, and finally we say, Kyle, could you please go find out what's going on? And he's been helpful with wrapping up a few of those cases, and sometimes it's the family has moved and he's able to follow that path and get to that point, and sometimes not, but he really is a nice asset for us. And when you look at the third of the cost that we share with the other two districts, as well as the county paying part of it, you can, if you want to scroll down a little bit, number 8 has the breakdown of costs. There we go. You can see how that position is funded, and so for 17.5% of his total salary, for us to get a third of his services still feels like a bargain for us. I don't know what specific questions you had about this, but
when we initially started this, it was going to be a 1-year trial period, is my understanding.
Okay.
Because we had a meeting at the lunchroom over at the high school, correct? We had some city back then.
Yes. Middle school.
Middle school.
Yep. Now I remember.
And showed up, and then I thought it was going to be a year-to-year renewal, and I'm just trying to figure out where we got to this 3-year contract and how the decision making was established. I'm not saying that Kyle's not doing a good job. I'm just wondering. I don't remember as a board member being a part of that conversation to make this a 3-year contract.
So what the board did was the board approved the financial side of things, and the board has authorized Jill and I to enter into contracts for the district. And so we came to the board with the financial side of things, and the board approved that. And then when it came time to the writing of the contract, due to budgeting, they couldn't do it on an annual basis, and it would have been difficult for us to do on an annual basis. And so at the time they said 2 or 3 years, what is going to work for all of those interested parties. I don't remember saying 1 year, let's try it out. What happened was the position, he was actually serving in that role before any financial agreement was made. So the Jackson County Sheriff's Office decided to allocate Kyle's time before there was a conversation about funding. And so he had already been serving in that role for the end of that school year. I'm trying to remember, but there was a national school safety event, or lack of school safety event, I guess. There was a large shooting, and I'm sorry to say there were so many, I can't remember which one, but that event happened, and then Sheriff Aldera said, that's it, I'm done waiting until we can move all the pieces. The county is gonna make this decision. And so they started Kyle in that role. That fall is when we started the conversations about who was going to divide the cost with whom.
I remember at the time, my recollection is similar, is that it was going to be a year to see, because the sheriff's department and the county does not have the same jurisdiction and ability to enforce ordinances as the city of Black River Falls.
For sure, we've known that all the way
Yeah,
through though.
and
Yep.
at that meeting, the city of Black River Falls was interested in providing an officer as well.
And then that fell through, and so that's why this took so long. So we started that conversation, and then the city said, we're gonna need you to pay $40,000, and we couldn't afford $40,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's good to kind of look at it, because I'm wondering if there have been any problems. I think Kyle's a great person. At the time, I thought there was more Kyle oriented than than sheriff's office or city oriented, and because he is very good at that, and had been already serving in that role. So I just wondered if there were any instances, or if the city responds as well as the sheriff's department?
Absolutely, we're absolutely, when we dial 911, we don't wait for Kyle, we dial 911, and if there's a city officer on duty, they come. The city is not staffed through many of our after-school activities, and so we ask Kyle to cover those when there's not a city officer on board. But if it is an imminent danger or need, 911. If it is a student or situation that we'd like some brain power and some thinking about, we call Kyle, and then he figures out when he can be here, and he'll come right away, or he'll come the next day, any of those things. So I feel like perhaps you two have some other information than I do,
No,
but I've not heard any concerns with.
I just wanted to follow up on the
Sure.
conversation, thinking about that situation, and where there was some idea that perhaps maybe the city office, the city jurisdiction was different. So the enforcement of what needed to happen may be up to the city rather than county.
Sure.
And I wanted to know if there was any issues going on that
Sure.
had come up.
So last year when we were having our truancy task force, there was some conversation that the city has an ordinance about simple truancy, that they could write a simple truancy ticket per ordinance. The county did not have the authority because it was a city ordinance. So we talked about that, and if the city, at one point, the city allowed our principals to have a book, and they could actually write a simple truancy ticket at the time. That has been gone for probably 15 years, but at this point, the city police chief will no longer allow their officers to write a simple truancy ticket, and so we were disappointed by that, and we're lobbying hard to allow that to happen. Kyle tried lobbying on our behalf, saying, sometimes it is just in-your-face defiance, and it should be slapped with a simple truancy ticket, as opposed to going through all of the steps with Health and Human Services for a referral for habitual truancy. And so we had that conversation last, probably January, February, when I was facilitating those truancy task force meetings. So the other thing with the city is they cannot respond to Gebhardt. And prior to Tammy's time over at Gebhardt, the police spent an awful lot of time over at Gebhardt, and so that always had to be the sheriff's department. I believe that sometimes the officers, Tammy, please help me if I'm wrong, I think once in a great while a city officer would just stop in, since you've been there, but not with any regularity.
Maybe once I've
Okay.
seen them.
It's always the county that responds to you,
It's
right?
always
Because
the
they're not in the city's jurisdiction at Gebhardt.
Yep.
But again, they're not there a fraction of the amount of time that they used to spend in that building. Which is fabulous. Which is fabulous.
I haven't seen it all this year.
Excellent.
You know, I was watching the news and La Crosse had that on their agenda at the school board, and they had a lot of people testifying that they didn't think the school resource person was necessary and they were intimidated. But I think that's the squeaky wheel gets the grease, because then Channel 8 did a telephone poll on how the community of La Crosse feels about SRO, and 75% were in favor of it. So it was just, you know, sometimes the squeaky wheel is.
You know, in my personal belief in it, I think we should have our own resource officer, not sharing one with other districts, but I'm also aware of the financial constraints that we are in Jackson County, and the school districts are in. This is better than nothing, but personally, coming from a larger community, we had school resource officers in almost one for each school, but we were able to do that, you know. If we could just say Kyle's ours and find your own, that would be fantastic, but we can't do that.
I would also be interested in having a conversation with the principals if they feel like there are times they wish Kyle was available and he's not. Because I feel like that would be justification as to whether we should consider more time. If they don't feel, there are many times when I walk through the high school, Kyle spends a lot of time in the social studies classes, and it often is a speaker in those rooms and stuff, so I see him up there. I'd be curious if the principals felt like there was a lack of that. I just want to bring up one other thing before we move on. I feel like there's been recently a couple instances where people's memories are different on things, and I just want to clarify, if you want that kind of specificity when a motion is made, because the board most definitely made a motion to approve the spending for the school resource officer, if you want it 1 year, then say that in the motion. Or if you're not asking for that, then don't say that in the motion. But then also remember that this board approves the minutes every single meeting. And so if there's a lack of specificity, when it comes time to approve the minutes, that would be a great time to say, now wait a minute, I'm wondering what blah, blah, blah. Because I don't like, my memory's not perfect by any stretch, nor is anyone else's. And so I don't ever want it to be, well, we told you this, but you did this. So I just would encourage everybody, specificity, if it matters to you, then you have the power in your motions, and you also have that responsibility when you're approving minutes, because I don't want you to say, we only said 1 year and you did 3 years. I don't know that it was for 1 year. And so I just wanted to share that with you, that that's a collective responsibility to make sure that our minutes match our motions and that our motions have the clarity that we're all looking for. So,
Just to,
soapbox over.
I'll go back and look at my notes, because this is a passionate topic for me, so I took a lot of notes on this. And two, can I ask why the city would refuse to do a truancy citation?
Yeah, there was a long conversation, and there was a time that, I'm just gonna make sure that wasn't one of the administrators looking for input here, sorry. While they're all zooming, I just wanna check, sorry. Laura Simonson just said that Kyle is always there when she needs him, and that sometimes it's a matter of calling him about an issue and just getting his thinking on it. So he also has a lot of connections that he can help us through. Simple truancy. So as a Department of Health and Human Services, as they evolve in leadership, and they've had quite a few leadership turnover, they sometimes want all truancy to go through them, and then the next person in charge will say, well, we don't have enough staff to be able to manage all truancy. And so that was really the point of that huge task force that I facilitated all last school year with Melrose-Mindoro School District, Alma Center, and Judge Becker, and Ho-Chunk Police, and County Police, and City Police. We met probably 9 times throughout the year to talk about our truancy procedures, and Health and Human Services was here, as was Corporation Council was here. And we all lobbied pretty hard for the simple truancy tickets to be a choice. And at that time, Chief Eisenseed just said, Human Services wants all truancy to go through them. And we continue
So they're doing referrals.
Yes.
And not
Our challenge is a student walks out the door and we say, you may not leave school grounds without permission. The kid turns around and says some choice words. I'm not talking about an elementary kid that runs, of course not. I'm talking about a high school kid that you say, I need you to come to the office to talk to me. They very intentionally walk away. Mr. Solheim stands in the doorway and says, I'm not going to chase after you. You may not leave school grounds, or that is simple truancy. And the kid will share some choice words and will walk away. Or drive or run or whatever. In the past, that could have been a simple truancy. And what Chief Eisenstein said to me during those meetings were, well, if he swears at you, then we can give him a disorderly conduct ticket as opposed to the simple truancy. So Judge Becker and City Attorney Dan Dean were going to meet with Chief Eisenstein to work through that because they also felt that a simple truancy in those cases would be a more direct consequence for those actions than a whole referral through Health and Human Services. That was, I think we had our last meeting end of February, and then truancy kind of fell by the COVID wayside.
So that would be Mark Radcliffe?
At the time it was.
Oh, I'm sorry, maybe he's not the city attorney. What is Dan Dean?
He's the
He's a DA.
The DA, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry, that was my mistake.
Okay.
My mistake, sorry.
So if we have a kid that's 18 and he wants to be truant, that cannot be a referral then.
Right, but there's only mandatory attendance until 18, so if they're 18, they don't have to attend. So truancy is no longer a thing.
Should have known that when I was 18.
When you went, it was probably 16, I'm just saying.
Are there any more questions or discussion?
So just to kind of avoid any discomfort on anybody's part, is this something that we should review periodically on an annual basis? Does anyone else feel a need to review this position?
Are you concerned about a lack of using them, or are you concerned about needing
No,
more?
I'm not concerned about anything. I
Just like an annual update of what the SRO does?
Yeah, I don't know if that feels like a good idea
I
or not.
thought we were getting,
Nope, he does not do an annual report for the board. He will serve at your pleasure, so we could certainly add an annual report if that would be your preference. He's always willing to do whatever we ask of him.
I know he's been to a couple of our meetings, that's why I just, okay. Is that what people,
I don't have a feeling either way, you know, unless there's a problem.
So right now it's a 3-year contract. Do you want a review before the next contract comes up, or annually? And what's your pleasure?
Past experience when our SROs would do a yearly report alongside, it would be the school district and the SRO that would write a report saying, these are the activities that the SRO attended, homecoming, there were no incidents, but at the end of the year they would say there were so many citations issued, some for truancy, so many citations for this. We had a simple accident in the parking lot, but see, that's where it gets fuzzy with us because the city jurisdiction and Kyle.
And I just keep saying we're the lucky beneficiary of all kinds of help that we
Yeah.
don't have to pay directly for.
And I guess-
so I think we're in a win spot, but
But you could ask for any, I mean, it's up to this board to say, hey, this is what kind of information we're looking at year end, what did the SR do, what activities did you respond to, and how was that compared to the other school districts? But if we're paying 30% of the share.
17.5%. Just to be clear,
Okay,
we're receiving 30% of the benefit, and we're paying 17.5% of the total salary.
I'm reading that clearly now. But it would just be nice to know.
So does somebody want to make a motion that we add an annual report, and then we can see what the will of the group is?
I'd like to comment
sorry.
on just the statistic part of it. I know a big part of this is just education and being around the students in a positive way, as well as the staff. It isn't always a citation or supervising wrongdoing. You know, I think that's where the concentration that we, as a board and as a district, had concentrated on that we wanted the education and the presence of a friendly law figure. So I mean, I don't know how we measure how many of those
If he's doing presentations in the classroom, that would be interesting.
presentations and individual, like when Mrs. Simonson chimed in, you know, just how.
Mr. Stallheim said that he will leave other districts when we call and we need him.
I mean, it's hard to measure that part of it, but absolutely, I think we all recognize how.
He also is very helpful with our emergency plan and drills and training of staff, so he serves on our district safety committee as well.
So Scott, you're just looking for an update every year.
Just throwing it out there, what would the board like to see? You don't have to have an update, it just,
Or just say that we do have annual reports on pretty much everything. And so just for that reason, even though not everything is quantitative, it is nice to just be updated on what's happening, maybe the general culture that you see, because of his presence, you know, whatever might be relevant. And it could be kind of aligned so that it, you know, if it's gonna be renewed every 3 years, then maybe that final report is also at the same time that we would be voting to renew that or whatever.
Tammy, you had a
I
comment?
want to add that, you know, when we did all of the assistant training last year, where we pulled all of the assistants together several times, he came several times and ran those training sessions, and went through internet safety and went through a lot of different things that were topics that he covered. So he took time out of his day, and made sure that he scheduled around everything else, in other districts to come for our assistant training. So it was outstanding, and he has been very responsive when we needed him.
I guess it is kind of good to know what you're saying, Tammy, because I wasn't aware he did that, so
He
if
did
the
for
public
all
would
the
ask us, it might be
assistants.
all right to have an update just for that reason.
I don't mean it in any critical way or that this is a criticism of the position, but I think it is good and it helps us know what's going on in the schools.
Yeah, I think an annual report would be just nice, you know, at the same time, each month, whenever, like at the end of December, early January, whenever you would feel it would be best, offered just an update on his services to keep,
Okay,
you know, what he's, and how the teachers and the buildings are using him for presentations or being connecting with the students would be a very positive, especially in today's society. Would
Okay,
be
so
nice.
I'm hearing that most of you would want at least a once-a-year report.
I'll make a motion that we have a
I'll second it.
once-a-year report,
Short report.
a short report.
Yeah, exactly.
By our resource, school resource officer.
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried.
Would it be possible to move up the focus on purpose before we do our other two topics?
It sure will be.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll make the motion to move 7.1 right now. Is there a second to that? All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay.
Sorry, ladies, I should have done that
Yes,
from the beginning.
yeah,
My
we should have, I'm
apologies.
sorry, so you guys could get home. Okay, we'll have, the K through 5 math presented by Mrs. Johnson, Roush, and Stephanie.
Yeah, that's true. Hi, welcome.
Hi, Joan.
Christy and I are representing the math department. Do you want to put the slide up?
There should be an on or off button on it, just on the side of it. Okay.
Okay, on the first slide, those are the people that put together this presentation from K to 5th grade. And I'm June Johnson, 1st grade, and Christy Roush is behind me. She represents 5th grade.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the foundation, the standards that we teach, the past work of the department, and the next steps. That's the whole presentation is going to be about.
These are the foundation math standards for K-5, starting with kindergarten counting and ending with geometry. We do a lot in 1st grade with number sense. All of 4th Street actually is number sense.
Okay, so we're going to look back at the work that our math department did in 1920. So a big focus from the math grant, many of the teachers in K-5 had worked either with the UW River Falls math grant, or we had Ashley Laguerre here last year too, giving some of that same training to people who weren't in the actual math grant. And mathematical practices are really, really big. Something that we worked on a lot in the math grant, and then it's in our math textbooks that we use with the kids. It's really integrated in there, trying to teach them how to be mathematical thinkers. Things like never giving up on a problem. You know, persevere, stick with it, don't just give up because it's hard. That kind of thing is what this is all about, the mathematical practices.
As I was saying, that slide you just saw, that is in every classroom in first grade, in the first grade classrooms, and probably many other classrooms. With Ashley being our math coach last year, she did a lot of work with talking about math talks. It was one of the most important messages she had for us. It had a high impact, I think, in the classroom, and teachers who were trained with Ashley are still using it today. The highest level problems are used. There's more than one way to solve a problem is how we approach it now from first grade on. Persevere. Think about how many times you can solve that problem. A lot of use of the whiteboards, and now they're in individual plastic bags with their own markers and whiteboards. So a lot of math talks is definitely a huge part of the elementary math program now.
And then this is the process that we go through as a math department at each grade level. We think about the guarantees. What are the standards that we are saying every single kid is gonna understand, be able to do by the end of the school year? And then we create common assessments that will assess that. Then we kind of work backwards and make the plan for how are we gonna teach that so they all can get those assessments. After we teach all of that and we give the assessment, then we dig through the data and we look really hard. Who is getting what specifically? I know at Red Creek, we have spreadsheets where we track every single kid for every single standard, multiple attempts at that standard to make sure we know what they can and cannot do. And then if they can do it, great. We have other things for them to do in a typical year like target time. So we have that intervention time scheduled for them, just ones that work with just our grade levels. I'm not talking tier 3 interventions. And we also find the kids that can't do it, and we find ways to teach them again and again and again and again and again until they get it, just to make sure we really are trying to guarantee every single kid is getting what we say. And then the last part is that curriculum revision, just looking back every year, we're tweaking things. Did we teach it the best that we could? What do we know now that's better? What can we revamp and teach it better next year?
Yeah. One of the things, before I go to next steps, first grade this year has started after the children take their math test, we've let them actually the next day look at the math test and have them react to it and make corrections. And it's really eye-opening to watch a first grader see how well they did on a math test. And then before they show their parents. So we're trying to push that self-efficacy to, how am I doing on this test? They see everything this year so they can improve, and they want to internalize it and improve. We also put all of our data into EduClimber so that the second grade teachers know exactly how each child did on each standard. And we've done that for like 3 or 4 years. Next steps, where are we headed? That is our history of where we've been in math. We're supposed to look at new material review, but with COVID that might be on hold for a year. Third grade had the biggest upgrade to align with their standards. I think virtual teachers, she's going to talk about the virtual program because she's an expert on it.
I'm trying. So this is more about math expressions before we get to that other stuff. The 2 pictures up there are from EdReports, which is a website that kind of ranks and sorts all the different curriculums out there that you can purchase. So we wanted to make sure that we were getting something that matched what we needed. And we did get an upgrade this year for 2018 for everybody else. Well, not first grade, but K, 2, 3 already had it, so 4 and 5, because they were offering it for a super discount because of course they wanted us to get it. But we're actually finding it's working out really, really well. I was really pushing last year, Stephanie, to kind of, hey, let's look at this again with all the math grant work. Like, what else is out there that's going to be more hands-on, more conceptual based, have more math tasks, have more number talks, all the stuff we've been looking for. And then I was pleasantly surprised when I started teaching out of this 2018 edition. It's got a lot of that stuff built right into it. So we didn't have to start something brand new again with math because we already were starting new stuff with ELA. So it was one thing, it was kind of a nice baby step into what we were really looking for.
I'll just share one more thing. One of the reasons why we looked hard at the upgrade, it's still the same product. It actually has the exact same lesson titles. It's the exact same scope and sequence, but it came with a lot more digital material, a lot more digital resources, and with the unexpectancy of virtual teaching happening perhaps sometimes in intermittent times, we wanted to make sure that we had quality digital things for students to access at home. And the 2013 edition that we currently have, all of their digital support was supported by Flash Media Player that is sunsetting in December. And so that was the big reason. And so the company shared that with us over the summer, and they said, you know, you can keep buying the workbooks for this current edition, because I said, well, we're going to do a review this school year and possibly land on something else. And they said, just want to let you know about the digital piece. And so in talking to the grade level leaders, and they talked to all their teams, and they said, we need to have quality digital things. And so we, as you can see the little pause sign in the corner, the leaders just kind of said, let's just pause for right now. We've got a good handle on things for this year, and then we'll kind of revisit it January and see if we do still want to go forward with the review and see what else is out there, or if you would want to decide on this, then it probably would come to the board for more official adoption of this version. That's kind of a, they were able to bill it to us this way because of COVID, like you said.
Can you just share what it says in the green and the yellow? It's hard to see it.
Sure, so that first, so it's grade level is the blue, so you can see all those listed there, then focus and coherence is how well it aligns to the standards, and then rigor and mathematical practices is the next column. So the box in the top corner is the 2013 version, and that was not as well aligned with the mathematical practices, and so they rewrote parts of the text, and so they still have the same lesson focus because the standard alignment was great. It was just those mathematical practices that were somewhat missing, and so they rewrote it.
How come first grade chose not to?
We had 3 new teachers and a huge ELA new curriculum, and to say we have a new math too, we thought it would be too overwhelming. Everyone walks into everything's new, and it's like so that was. And a lot of these teachers we hired did not actually finish student teaching, so but they're safe. It was like we didn't quite know what new meant.
Sure,
Too.
Yeah, we didn't know how closely it was gonna be aligned
Yeah.
until we started digging into it, so that was really nice to know. It was very similar. Okay, and then the last one, like Stephanie said, we're digging into all those virtual supports. I'm a tech coach for our building, so I've been trying to train teachers on some of those virtual things in case they need to go virtual, they're ready to do that, or if they just wanna use it in their classrooms. I know there was a 4th grade teacher who found some manipulatives that she was super excited were already online, ready to go. She just assigned it to her kids and off they went. She was super, super excited about that. The other thing is without that target time like I talked about, this is how people are kind of compensating for that. So using small group math time in their classrooms, having those center rotations in there, and then really just continuing to look for solutions as we go. What can we figure out how to best meet every kid where they are? And then did you have any questions for us?
I think that was one of my questions, when you have kids that move through the curriculum at different rates, is that when small groups become helpful? Or how do you keep one group from feeling like they're not too enough, or, you know?
Yep, and that's the really great thing about math. I find as a 5th grade teacher that I can teach kids to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. That's always my go-to because that's the hardest thing we do all year. We do it right away. Even if they can't subtract with regrouping, you know, I can still teach them how to do this, but I can come back and remind them, hey, you know how to subtract, you've done it before, I'll remind you and get you back up to speed again. But that's the great thing about math. I can kind of keep both things going at once, so that small group instruction is that place to kind of remediate or help the kids who are struggling in the new content. You can meet with them then too.
I have a question, Chrissy, since you're teaching virtual 5th grade.
Yeah.
What are you finding with the mastery levels of your virtual kids versus the kids that are in actual classrooms? Do you have any comparisons yet on that?
Anecdotally, nothing official.
Okay.
It's so hard to teach virtually. It really, really is. Like I'm finding the level of engagement that I can get these kids is tricky because it's so easy to be tempted to have this device in front of them. How easy is it to just open a new tab? Nobody's gonna see you. Go on YouTube. You're watching YouTube videos, but you're still looking at your camera. It looks like you're engaging. So it's really, really, really tricky. Or you have some kids who are super, super focused and really with me all the time. So I'm really trying hard to do like thumbs up, thumbs down, get your whiteboard out, write your answers, like really trying to be engaging. So it kind of is ebbing and flowing. Like I said, we start with math, the hardest thing we teach, adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators as a 5th grade. we expect maybe 50% of the kids to be proficient at that after our first go-round with it. And then we do that first because then you have the whole rest of the school year to scoop up all those kids as you reteach it and reteach it and reteach it. One of the great things about math expressions is they have what they call the remembering side, and it's spiral review. So all this stuff you're teaching and everything from years before constantly comes up throughout the school year. So they're always, always, always practicing. So my scores weren't great off the first test, but I wasn't super surprised either, you know? So it's kind of really hard to
interesting
gauge
to see
it.
how that compares throughout.
Especially because we're throwing COVID in there.
Yeah.
Yes.
They missed so much
They missed
of
so
fourth
much.
grade.
Mhm.
So it's really, you can't compare apples to apples, I don't think.
And she gets the kids that have to quarantine for 14 days pop into the virtual class as well. And so each day there's kids that were in Amy Teet's room in 5th grade, and then the next day for the 14 days they're with Christy. And so there's lots of ebb and flow is a good way to describe the agility.
But we're really trying hard to stay all on the same page. Like we plan together every week to make sure, okay, these are the lessons. Monday, try to do 2-4, you know, or at least by the end of the week, get to this lesson so that when that happens, the kids aren't missing a beat, which is awesome.
Same thing at Red Creek. We meet every week to make sure we're together.
Okay.
At 4th Street, sorry.
We knew what you meant.
Little kids, yeah.
Any other questions for the ladies?
Well, we've heard so much about the math grant for years, and it's just really good to see you using the information and as a team and working together, and especially in these hard times.
It's made a huge difference in kids.
Thank
For
you.
sure. And for us, the adults.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, to give each other support, and you have the virtual specialists. Yeah, thank you very so much
You
for
can
everything.
differentiate with just 1 or 2 words. It's amazing.
Mhm.
Thanks so much for coming tonight, ladies.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the review of board policies 341-2 and 361-1.
And so you were looking for just a
Conversation, I guess, was it Patty? You brought it up, you
I
wanted to
was.
talk about?
I
Okay.
kind of wanted to review this, and the reason is because every once in a while, especially in election years, there come complaints about what's being taught or what's brought up or how something's being only used this way and not that way. And so I think it would be nice to have something for prevention in place. So when you have a policy, you have to know how it's implemented. So that's, I guess, was the question that I had. So we have these policies, and especially on the 361.1, it says that legal responsibility for classroom instructional materials is the board. It rests with the board, so it's up to us to know what it is. And it's, I think, a little bit more difficult now because so much of the website instruction, you know, these references are off of websites and media sources and that sort of thing. So my question was then, how is this reviewed, or how is this done, or if a teacher decides to go and use something on the radio or something on the internet, do they review that with the principals as our policy says, or is it not reviewed? Is there a list like in what their curriculum is going to be and the references that they give students to look up? Is that collected someplace?
It is not, because I would say that it's constantly evolving, that I teach it this way one time and then I hear of another resource that might bring a new twist to it, and so I use this resource at that time. That would be like, that would be any age classroom, a kindergarten teacher who is talking about our family and then finds a nice video somewhere that is a kindergarten appropriate video about our family. There's not a process, to be honest. The man hours it would take for somebody to identify that and then refer that to somebody else so that they could view it and then give approval would be an incredible slowdown of the process. So we do not approve every website that a staff member uses. If you want to talk about how this policy is implemented, I will tell you that, so this is in our handbook, and when we hire new staff, I go through the handbook with each staff member, and I very specifically talk about how important it is that I use lots of different examples, and I always say that the best compliment would be to have taken social studies from an individual for, you know, X number of years and still have no idea how that individual votes by the time that they are done. And so, the importance of showing all sides, and they hear it from me, and then the social studies teachers definitely hear it through their department meetings as well. And Steph, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your interactions with the social studies department on this.
Sure. So because we did have a few late hires that didn't necessarily get to hear that from Shelley, or just because it is an election year and social studies is often where we do current events and some other pieces, I did send both of these policies to our social studies PLC leaders, and with a lot of guidance on reviewing them. And so I did see that in their last minutes over the last couple of weeks that they sat down and looked at them as a staff. A couple of years ago, when this topic was discussed heavily at the board, and there was different surveys that went out about different resources that were used and those kinds of things, the high school social studies department drafted a philosophy of how they utilize resources, specifically media outlets and other resources, to talk about current events and historical events. And so that philosophy I also shared again with the department, and asked them to review that and talk about why is it important that we maintain our commitment to what the teachers within the school district Black River Falls had already committed to. And so with staff changes in staffing, just wanted to make sure that that was all recalled and discussed. And so good conversations, and I wasn't at either meeting where they discussed it, but in their notes it was reflected that we did go over it, and as well.
We've had the discussion about the content, you know, before. So.
Yeah, as a follow-up.
Yeah,
to
and a
board
follow-up,
development,
yes, thank you, I remember that.
That was my action step.
Any more discussion on that? You said there were a lot of complaints. I mean, I haven't heard any complaints.
There are complaints that come up periodically from community members. And I can tell you who they are, who they aren't. I don't think it matters who they are.
But it does if we want to fix it,
yeah.
just to be clear.
However, if you are looking at a particular, what is that called? Curriculum is not curriculum. So this semester we're studying this, and these are your resources. And these are the websites I want you to check. And refer to and report on. It doesn't seem to me that it would be that hard to turn that list in to someone to look at, or to the board to look at, or something. I don't know that we have to do that, but it doesn't seem to me that, you know, if this keeps coming up, then why are we not addressing it? What are we doing to make sure the evaluations of content are completed? And how do we know as a board that that's being done?
And so I'm going to share my extreme frustration.
Yeah.
You have both reported this to me several times, but you've never given me a teacher. If you give, not never, when you've given me a teacher, Steph or I can go have that conversation and say, let's talk about what happened in that class. This was the perception, help me understand, and sometimes we can guide back, do you understand how it could feel like this? And we can have that conversation. When we hear teachers, there's there's 170 teachers. And so it's that correction is most effective at the level closest to the action.
Yeah.
For us to say, when you're discussing critical issues, make sure you show both sides. If I'm the person not doing that well, I don't think they're doing that on purpose, and so they might need someone to come and tell them, and once they've told them to not do that anymore and talk through that whole process, and here's what you could have done different, all that stuff, and then they do it again, well, now you maybe are doing it on purpose, and that's a whole different conversation. But it's like sending an email, two people come in late every single day, and you send an email saying, we have to be here on time, like 98% of the staff are like, we know, we're here on time, you know what I mean? It is very, very difficult to identify the problem. And I know we've had conversations before where you say, well, they want to be anonymous. I don't need to know who said it. I need to know what adult within our system is not upholding the values and the standards and the expectations that the district has, and we can correct that. I don't know how to go at the comment that people are complaining, because they're not complaining to me, and they're not complaining to people who can do something about it. So
is this a better conversation to have not at a board meeting then?
If you have the name of a staff member who somebody has complained about, I felt like we've had a lot of conversations. When you get a complaint from a community member, your first responsibility is to call me and say, Shelley, I heard this today, could you please do some investigating?
I think we've done that in the past.
Over some things we certainly have, yep, we certainly have. And so this topic, you've not done that. And you've shared with me general, I've heard this in the community, and I say, with what adult? Well, it was at the high school. I need more information than that. So the lack of clarity makes it difficult for us to be able to address.
Well, I think at the board development meeting, staff was able to pick up on who that
True. I guess
instructor was,
Yeah.
and they corrected that problem. I've shared a name in the past that I continue to get complaints on, but I keep thinking.
Then I need to know that.
Yeah.
If we have a policy that says we're gonna teach a subject and then we want it to be neutral, then that's what we would expect to happen.
100%.
Because, I mean, the old saying goes, in any profession you're at, if I'm up here teaching and if my students know my political affiliation, I'm wrong. I've messed up. I should be teaching a subject without giving a personal belief or point of view. And I don't think a board meeting is the time to say this is the person, and you're absolutely correct. The next time somebody calls me, I will call you direct and say, here's what I've heard, and here's the person's name.
Thank you.
I think that's just the best way to do it, because we'll keep it out of the group discussion.
I don't want you or anybody else in our community frustrated with a staff member who is completely oblivious of the problem. I mean, that's not gonna help anybody, right? And so us being able to have that conversation with them and say, but we've heard this, and so help me understand what it looks like here. I mean, that really is our challenge, because to be honest, that scenario that you used, they should be, and we expect people to do that. You're absolutely right. Just like I expect Christy Roche to be responding to the students' needs, and unfortunately, because there's not an administrator in every class, everywhere, we unfortunately don't know until somebody tells us that it's not happening. We set forth our expectations and we assume good people are doing the good work exactly like the district would want them to. And unfortunately, it's that no news is good news, right? I mean, we spot check and spot observe and pop in and out of classes, but we're certainly not day to day in the same room. And so and if you've told me and we've tried to address it and it's still not getting better, then by all means you should hold my feet to the fire and say, you said you were gonna fix it. But I can't paint with that broad of a brush and say, teachers, you all are supposed to, because I really believe most teachers think they are.
So again, the policy is being implemented.
To the best of our ability, right? I mean, isn't that what policies are? Like laws, you can't cite all the laws, but you know when somebody breaks one, right? I mean, it kind of is that same thing.
And as a board member, I don't want to have to approve every resource that every teacher uses in every classroom. I feel that's micromanaging, and that's not my job. But I agree, if someone's doing something wrong, I never hear any of those.
I think I don't like to say it's the person that's purposely doing something.
They probably
Sometimes
are.
it's complaints about content. And, we're responsible for the content, and so then we need to have a way to.
Tell me what resource and what class, and I'm on.
I think we all know that we encourage our students to be critical thinkers, and so sometimes different sides will be presented, but a balance of that, and so the student can decide for themselves. And I've not heard complaints, so I agree with, if you have people who complain, it's just like a letter to the editor needs to be signed before it is appreciated by the community. If someone has a complaint, please let them come and take care of that rather than fussing about it in the community, and thinking that the school is doing something wrong with.
Board members know because they think they can do something about it.
Yeah.
And so give me those details.
Yeah.
I mean it. I mean, you should be holding me accountable to that, but I can't fix what I don't know the details of. It's really what it boils down to.
So I would imagine that most of these issues would come up in a social studies setting, because that's where this sort of topic is most likely to be discussed, and views, whether, wherever they may be on that spectrum, come up. it ever part of the discussion, like at the beginning of the school year, with the students to say, you know, we will be talking about things that you may or may not agree with the point of view, but our goal is to let everybody share those points of view. Do we ever share that with the students, with these sorts of expectations, and maybe even with the parents, that it is the expectation that.
I think you would be amazed at some of the high level conversations they have, like Tony Berger in his class, what does he call that discussion with,
Socratic seminar.
yeah, the Socratic seminar, where, you know, the problem is there, and then the kids debate each other in the classroom, and that happens so much more regularly than I believe any of you would think possible. And so that's why when I see that great stuff happening, and then I hear the broad brush, it's really challenging for me, because he does that Socratic seminar a lot, and he says, holy cow, you should see some of those kids get pretty fired up at each other, and then he says at the end of class, he always has to de-escalate them. Okay, we're all still friends, we are all still, you know, classmates, and we're still colleagues, and we can disagree on this stuff, and look at the rationale that each of you were able to come up with. And he says our goal is not to change somebody's mind, but to to support their thesis. You know, they're basically having that debate, and so not to change people's mind, but debate to find the supporting details for what you believe. And so it happens a lot.
I think that's terrific.
Oh, agreed.
To respect, listen, and to respect everyone's viewpoint.
And he says he likes to be devil's advocate and argue on both sides sometimes, just to stir the pot.
That sounds like fun.
Stephanie, I saw you stand up. Were you just trying to see better?
No, I was just gonna, when we were talking more about the resources themselves, I was just going to add that I think that all resources that we review, we very specifically go through the parts of this policy. So as teachers go through that review process, it's part of our rubric that we utilize to review materials. And so we definitely adhere to all those pieces and talk about their importance. And so every several years, you know, some teachers go through that process. I was just gonna also add that when we select a resource, we don't necessarily use it from cover to cover. And so I think that's also something important to remember, that sometimes somebody might pick up a book and see something they don't appreciate in it, but knowing that teachers are armed with that critical thinking, that they don't always use everything that's in there. And so that would be another important piece as we do field concerns. That's happened before, where parents have called me upset about a particular resource, only to find that we skip that entire unit, or we don't use that entire chapter, just because resources are not always written by teachers, and so some of it we use and some of it we don't use. And so that's important.
I noticed on Rule 361.1 that on number 3 that we are supposed to have the textbooks and stuff on hand. Do we ever have parents who want to look at that material?
Every once in a while, not very often.
Yeah, I've had
Not
it
very often.
over the years.
Okay.
But I mean, we have enough for each student, and so we usually do have a few extras around, or can produce a copy as needed.
If a parent asks, we certainly can find them one. It's a more of a study.
Is there any more discussion on those policies?
I would just like to conclude by saying I think this is an important discussion to have, because it is an issue for a lot of people in the community. So even if we all think everything is good, at least they know we're talking about it and it's out there and we've reviewed it. So I think policy review is probably a good idea.
Okay, that one is good. Both have been reviewed pretty recently, but we certainly, be keen.
Okay, and we'll move on, and Mr. Hart has joined us.
Excellent.
So thank you.
Excellent.
We'll
So
hear
we
about
wanted
his-
to recognize Max Hart. You want to name it actually, Joe?
Shelley, did you sign it?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So we wanted to recognize Max Hart with a board commendation, because as all of that crazy food service was going on this summer, I shared with you earlier.
Come on up, Max.
Come on up, Max. I shared with you earlier, Max has been a longtime FFA champion, and his link to the farming community is very, very, very strong. And so he came up with this awesome creative solution, and our families were absolutely ecstatic. Connie got phone calls the first time that fresh cheese curds went home in those meal bags. Oh my goodness, were people excited. Would you explain the process and how that happened?
Yeah, so I'm with the FFA here in town, but I'm also the chairperson for the Jackson County Dairy Promotion Committee. And we're the ones that always put on the dairy breakfast every year. Well, this year we didn't do it, just with COVID and everything, but we wanted to find a way to help support the farmers, because the milk price was really going down back in March. And of course, these kids were at home and help support their daily nutrition, which dairy products are good for their nutrition. So some other organizations were doing Courage for Kids. They did a lot of that in Trumbull County. And so literally I just stole their idea for Jackson County.
But you made it happen. You
Yes,
had the
yeah.
initiative and you made it happen.
So I
You
worked
borrowed.
with bake, borrow, and steal. That's what I learned in school. So yep.
And or collaborate
Yes.
is another word for it,
Yep.
and we all come out better. But
Yeah. So we worked with our local organization, the Jackson County Dairy Promotion Committee. We partnered with different creameries like Lynn Dairy, Masonville Cheese Curds, Westby, and AMPI. We ran it for 6 weeks. I think we did about 1,200 pounds each week, so that's a lot of curds. Probably some of the biggest in our area. And we actually have funding still available, so we might try to do something this fall yet. We're glad that the students are back in school, so we might be able to buy curds at 20 pounds, buy 20 pounds a bag, and then have the food service, the lunch ladies distribute that out too. So we got
remember,
a
we
meeting.
are still doing virtual meal pickup on Wednesdays. We have about a couple hundred
Oh, really?
now.
Okay.
So Wednesday nights there's still virtual meal pickup. So
So we might do that, and then we might try to get it on the lunch lines, like on Wednesdays, or not Wednesdays, but on Fridays. But I'll work with Connie on that. So because
we'd love to get a photo if we could.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You two wanna?
I heard you were bringing samples tonight.
I forgot about it. I should.
He had another meeting. He was busy.
Yeah, I had county board tonight.
Oh.
We got a shake, or we got a
No,
hug or
no,
something?
no,
so-
we don't touch.
No, I'm just
We-
being
no
funny.
touching.
Right.
But
Smi-
you can
Smile,
smile.
yeah.
I gotta see your eyes smile, right? Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you
and
guys.
thank you so
Thanks
much.
for coming, Max. We
Yeah.
appreciate your
And-
time, and it's okay that you borrow great ideas because it still takes the time, effort, and energy
Yeah.
to bring them to fruition. So thank you.
Yeah, it
for
took
that
a
on
lot.
behalf of our
It
kids.
was great. We actually were able to partner a lot, and we brought all the cheese curds to Jackson County,
Yeah.
or to Blackford Falls,
And
I
then
should
the
say.
others.
Then we had people come pick them up from the Melrose and then Alma Center school districts. So
You know, there are many kids throughout our nation in other states, they don't even know what cheese curds is until Culver's gets into their state. And then they go, what is cheese curds? But I mean, that's really, really, really true.
yeah, they're
So,
missing out on
yeah.
things. So.
Yeah, yeah,
All
thank
right,
you.
thank you
Thank you
guys.
so much, Max.
Yep.
Thank you.
Not to rehash, but Mr. Chambers did send in a text a bit ago that said he has personally had conversations and reviewed those policies regarding the critical issues with social studies teachers this fall in light of the elections. Thanks, Tom.
Okay. Okay, I think now we move on to employment recommendations.
Actually, I had a
Oh,
couple
COVID
updates.
update.
if I could.
Yeah, that's under here. Okay,
All
COVID,
right.
sorry.
So I just wanted to share this with you. We had decided early on this summer that we were going to send an email. Well, I did my community conversations and parents said, how will we know? And I said, you know what? I will send an email home that tells you when we have a positive case. I, at that time, had no idea how often this was going to happen. I had no idea. I am deeply concerned about needing to send an email on a daily basis because I feel like it creates a picture of a lot more than its current reality. And so I've looked, and some other districts do something like a dashboard that they keep updated each day on their website. And so those individuals that want to know each day can go to that dashboard and find it. And those that don't want the reminder every day don't have to look at it. So I'm curious what the board's thoughts are on something like this. I would do a change. This one has the building and then active cases. I would probably have, I would recommend having a column for total cases as well per building so that there was that added to that grand total going in that last column. Does anyone have initial thoughts on that? I will tell you that I feel like I want to do a community conversations a Zoom opportunity for community people and just talk to them about this idea because I don't want any parents to feel like we're trying to hide or not be completely upfront and forthcoming with the information. Each time I send one of those out, I usually get some positive response from some families and I invariably get some negative response from some families. And so I'm struggling with where does the majority lie on this, and so thought if the people that really want to know have it available to them every day, that would be there, and I wouldn't be bothering everybody with that information if that wasn't something that they wanted on a daily basis.
I think it's kind of a good idea because when you look at the public health one, some people want to know exactly where those cases are. You know, they're really frantic about that. And This way people could just look, would you have it right on our webpage and then?
So on our website, do you wanna go back to the agenda and instead of this? Just cause it's another district, so I don't went up there too long. On our website, we have a thing that says COVID-19 info, and so it would be, click on the COVID info, and then it would be like a dashboard, that I would update at the end of each day.
I think that is a great idea. What I might suggest is put, or you may have different feelings about this, but what's really important is new cases and active cases. Total cases that are over and done with aren't.
That's why I wanted one to say active and one to say total. So I suggested that there be another
So
column.
you would say active rather than meaning new?
I would say active because at the end of their isolation period, they're no longer active.
Right.
So when a student tells us they're positive, we know exactly the date that they are no longer, and then we would take them off that. So it would be active cases and total cases.
So the total cases would not include the ones that have been done with their quarantine?
It would. That's what total would be.
Well, yeah, I see, and I'm not sure the value of that.
I'm going to say that there's people who would want to know that.
Okay.
I would, that's my guess. But.
Okay. Because new would be important. We had 3 new today, and the total of people who are actively quarantined. And then if somebody is out of the total, they're back in school, right?
I was not going to put the number of quarantine kids on there. I don't know.
What is an active case then?
Isolation because they are currently tested positive, so they are
not quarantined.
So some kids are quarantined because they may have been exposed, but they're not necessarily.
So the language that I use with public health is isolated means you are symptomatic.
Right.
So you are in isolation if you have any COVID-like symptoms. If you are positive, you are still isolated.
Right.
If you are deemed a close contact but are asymptomatic, you are in quarantine. You can test out of isolation, so you have some symptoms, you get tested, and so you can test out. Quarantine, you may not test out of. So they're in our mind and the way we've communicated with parents, those are two very different things.
Yeah. So
I was not going to share quarantine because that's a like. Yeah. So today there were
that's a huge number.
3 new cases today. Yep.
Yes.
Before this meeting started, I was notified of 3 new cases today. I haven't heard from Elizabeth in the last hour, so it might be more by now. So I would put those in the active cases, and then I would put I have a spreadsheet with when everybody comes off being active, and then there would be 1 less active, and there'd be 1 more in the total column is what I'm suggesting.
Whatever you do with the dashboard is a good idea instead of a daily letter.
Does anyone else have feedback or input on that?
Sounds like a better idea than a.
Do you feel like I should give parents the opportunity for feedback on that, or do you think just explain it to them?
Just where they can find the information if they want it.
Because I think if somebody's been exposed, that's being communicated to those relevant families anyway.
100%. So,
I might see 3 or 4 of these a week, but they aren't affecting me directly. So kind of I would say it feels messy, whereas this feels much more straightforward. And
to be honest, part of it is my orange frog stuff. Like, what do you see right in front of you, right? What are you giving attention to? And when you send an email every day, it's like, oh my God, another one. But yet, if you think about it, you came to your inbox, but one was at 4th Street and one was at the middle school. And so it's not, one building all the time, but I understand people who are deeply concerned that it just feels like, oh my God, another one. And so I feel like if we track it by building and make that available to them anytime they want to know, they don't have to sort through their emails and all of that stuff was my thinking. All right, thank you. And then the other thing that I did want to talk about, our cases are increasing. And so middle of last week, after I spent a lot of hours of my day contact tracing, and not because public health is not fantastic, because they are, but their numbers are really, really increasing fast, and they don't have enough staff to do the contact tracing. So Elizabeth and I have been doing it, and today Jill started, and Stephanie and Mary Jo actually got some initial training in how to do contact tracing. And so I'm hopeful that we don't have to have all those people doing it, but we definitely do it in teams, because it is pretty lengthy process and detailed to get through, and then we notify the families. Anyway, I started to get concerned because it was day after day after day, and I was wondering if it was time to pivot and do something different from our current school arrangement. I talked at great length with public health, and they said, I can't monitor the texting while I'm trying to have, sorry. They said that at that point, none of the cases that we had experienced were school spread. What she said was that the schools were not spreading the virus. We were continuously trying to respond to community spread, and that was the case up until Friday. And so I shared that with all staff. We definitely have some staff members who are 100% thinking that we are doing the right thing, and kids are so much better off, and they are feeling confident and comfortable. And we absolutely have some staff who are very nervous about our current arrangements, and they are concerned how many cases is enough before we start doing something different. And so I would say that our staff is a reflection of every community across the nation right now, in that we don't have one collective voice, we have hundreds of individual voices is what's currently happening. And so I did a district update on Friday and shared all of the information with them about not being a school spread, and agreed that we were going to continue to touch base with public health and see at what point they felt that it was necessary to pivot. As of tonight, our second full elementary classroom is in quarantine for 14 days, and several adults from the building. And the more that our support staff are out on quarantine, the more challenging it's going to be to provide the services for the kids in the building. And so I just want you to be updated that as you see the community numbers continue to grow, we are absolutely feeling that. We are absolutely trying hard to respond to that. I talk to Christy Hansen and Ellen Moldenauer probably 4 or 5 times a week, and I appreciate their partnership a great deal. But I just am always concerned and feel like I want to make sure that staff recognizes we're not trying to be reckless with their health, but that we're listening to other people, and we're trying to do as they advise. So I also shared with staff that as of last week, in our region of 26 districts, there is only, at that time, there were 4 that were all virtual. 3 of them invited their elementary kids back face-to-face this week, and only 1 of them is still continuously all virtual. And so there's a lot of schools that have middle school and high school doing it every other day, but there's only, Sparta is the only one that remains full virtual at this time. So I also wanted to share that with staff so that they didn't feel like we were being some kind of a renegade. We were really still in line with what the rest of our region was doing as well.
Are you feeling public health is going to tell you that we're starting to change and that we need to pivot?
I feel like the relationship that I have with them, they are always like, well, let's talk this through. I mean, they will not tell us what we must do. They will talk through and say, let's think about this. Did you think about that? I heard from so-and-so. And so it really is a nice collaboration. And I did say, I need you to tell me when it's time to just say, we need to pause. I asked specifically the question because that was after another positive high school case. I said, would it benefit us to close the high school and just do virtual for 2 weeks? Like that whole idea of if there's nobody coming face-to-face for 2 weeks, would that be helpful? And that's when she said it really wouldn't, because we're not spreading it at the high school. And so she honestly said that the kids that are coming to school and are staying socially distanced and are wearing the face coverings are better off than where they would be otherwise in the community. And so at that time, she did not see a benefit to closing the high school for 2 weeks.
Well, and if we are at this point at least experiencing any spread because of contact within school, personally, I'd like to see it continue, the kids continue to be able to meet, because you hear so many really scary statistics about the mental health troubles that people are having because they're so isolated.
Absolutely. And I will tell you,
and you know, eventually, because our students, if they're at home too much rather than in the classroom, it's going to have an economic impact in their future as well.
Absolutely. Today we had our first instance of school spread. So today, that happened between 4 and 5:30 this afternoon.
Okay.
So, I've not had a chance to talk to public health about that yet. They were busy today. They had lots of, I'm guessing a lot of people waited over the weekend, and so then they got a lot of results back this afternoon, and we're scrambling trying to cover. So I'm confident Elizabeth Pardo, that woman should be sainted after this year. She is frantically calling all those families into quarantine tonight, so.
So do you happen to know, offhand, how many active cases we have right now at this point?
In the district right now?
Yeah.
The last one that we just got a call on has already been quarantined, and so they're still active because they are our students, so I just got them for a second.
In ballpark, if you.
I wanna say 8. 8 is my guess. I think I've sent 8 emails, that's really what sticks to me. I could look it up in a heartbeat, but my guess is 8.
No, that's fine.
Those are coming back tomorrow.
And some are coming back tomorrow, like our first cases are coming back tomorrow, so in my world of the dashboard, they would come off of active tomorrow, and they would go into that total column, is what I'm suggesting.
Those are positive, you're seeing positive tests.
Oh my gosh, we have a lot more kids in isolation with symptoms, those are positive confirmed tests, yes. Yes. A lot more in isolation and quarantine.
And I just want to support what Amy was saying, that there's so much more than just saying that we're going to close the school down because of the crisis, because the mental health thing is we don't want to overlook that. The statistic the other day was kids from 16 to 24 are thinking about suicide at a 50% rate right now. These are just things that, there's just a lot of things that we have to consider, and it's not an easy decision. That's why we pay you the big bucks.
I'm a little beyond sarcasm this evening, Scott, but you feel free to give it a whirl.
But it's just, I wouldn't want to be in your position to have to make that call, but I'm sure that if you make that call, it's going to be supported with the health department and everything else. But I just,
I haven't been cavalier about it up till now. I really haven't.
Right.
I feel like we continue to work closely, and yeah, I appreciate the authority and the faith that I will make a responsible decision. I just feel I also need to keep you guys informed each step of the way, and so yeah, I will.
2020 over yet?
Not nearly fast enough. Not nearly. And our last conversation about the high school with the Wednesdays, that is happening this coming Wednesday for the first time, and there's been, I hope, good communication out to the families, the staff, just so that you know. Stephanie and I and Chris and Tom, we empowered them to help us figure out, so you said that you didn't have enough time to circle back on those kids who are struggling. How can this day be configured to be most helpful to meeting your needs? And we really left it open for them. And it's a lot of people with a lot of unique needs. You know, you've got one who teaches AP classes saying, oh, I don't want to give up another day of instruction the whole time. Then you've got others saying, oh my gosh, I need to be able to circle back on these kids. And so they came up with a plan, and we're going to give it a whirl for the first time this Wednesday. And I asked Mr. Chambers and Mr. Solheim to please let me know if they received any negative feedback from families, because I wanted to keep tabs on that, thinking that you would also want to know. And I've not gotten anything from them at this time. And so my sense, as I talked to my colleagues, our neighbors in Jackson County, Mr. Arts said that he went to every other Friday. They are shut down district-wide. And I said, did you get any pushback? And he said, people are just so glad their kids get to come the other days, that there hasn't been any pushback. So I wanted to give that update, and I'll let you know if we do start to have some concerns with that Wednesday. But right now, I am certain it's going to be put to some great use.
Did any of the other schools kind of say, hey, what about us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I feel like we can very clearly articulate why the high school is unique, and was also able to do some great brainstorming with the principal from the building that said, hey, what about us? We were able to do some brainstorming about finding some smaller blocks of time throughout the week as opposed to a full day where kids don't come. So.
And is it true, if I'm remembering correct, like at the high school in the afternoons, if they want to bring kids in for some of that instruction, they can?
Absolutely. And that was a big wish of the teachers, like, could we bring some small groups in? Particularly some of our special education teachers said, my gosh, I would love to be able to bring them in for this piece or this piece. And so they do have that ability to bring them face to face. Transportation may be a challenge, but we said to, particularly for our special education students, if transportation was a challenge, to let us know and we would work it out. Yep. All right, those were my COVID updates for tonight.
Okay.
If you'd like to talk for hours on the subject.
Oh.
Gosh,
No, we want you to be able to sleep too. Okay. We have some employment recommendations.
Yes, we have some hires
New
there, and then
hires.
I'm also going to tell you about a situation at the high school that you may have heard about. We have a math teacher who resigned this morning. Was a new teacher this morning that Mr. Chambers has been working closely with that teacher and with another teacher who has been a special education teacher who co-teaches one of the classes. And Mr. Chambers has been fielding parent complaints and student complaints about this individual staff member, and has tried to be supportive, and in the end, the health of that staff member became a factor and decided to resign today. And so Jill and Stephanie and Tom and Chris put their heads together because it is October 19th and we now need a fully certified math teacher, and they just don't exist. Marty did some searches in the entire state of every math teacher on Weekend. That's the tool that teachers use to apply for jobs. Everybody who's updated their resume in the last year, and like all three of them were called today, and they already have positions and they're not interested in moving. And so we honestly have started talking about, okay, so do we purchase like the Wisconsin Virtual School curriculum for those individuals and have them do that? Do we hire another math teacher who's willing to teach virtually from another district and work in overload? Our math department last year, our math department is 4 teachers, help me, Steph? Yep, and 3 of the 4 left last year. So we have 1 individual who's trying to mentor 3 teachers, and it's math, it's high school math. And so I just wanted you to know, if you hear some complaints or concerns, Mr. Chambers and Mr. Solheim are all over it, and we're now checking into, could we find a sub for the special ed teacher who's doing great work in the math room? Is there somebody that could support him, supporting his students in other ways? And so we really are looking at it as a bigger zoom out puzzle and how we could possibly get somebody to meet those kids' math needs. So. Questions or concerns about that?
Okay, is there a motion to approve the employment recommendations?
Motion.
Thank you. Second from Scott? Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carried.
We should probably talk about our people committee that we met.
Sure, I'm sorry, I did not
Sure.
put it on here.
That's right.
We did meet on October 14th. Some via Zoom, some in this room. And we went over our mission statement, and we talked about how to recognize staff COVID style. You know, years ago, well, in past years, we've had food and everybody touches and serves, so we had a lot of good suggestions. I don't know what we'll land on, but a lot of good suggestions with that. We talked about orange frog training and how to keep that fresh in people's minds, and we kind of landed on maybe work on some of the professional development days and perhaps some staff development time that we would just do little snippets on orange frog. And then we did data dig on to the building environments and took a look at those. Anything else?
No, that's perfect, and I'm sorry that I forgot to put it on here. I apologize. We did decide that we're going to do, instead of the 1-week celebration for American Education Week and then the spring Teacher Appreciation Day, we're going to do raffles every Friday, and everybody in the district will be thrown in there, and we'll pick some winners. And we thought we'd go to local businesses and purchase some and ask them if they're willing to do any in-kind. The idea being that we are not buying food for any of those celebrations. We're not traveling to any PD. We're not serving them breakfast at the PD because it's all in the building. And so there's funds that we've always used for staff appreciation that we will put to that.
Okay, we'll move on to student success and the summer program report. That didn't happen.
So, yes, I didn't have the usual form, so I apologize for that. So I did put on there what our recent years had been, and so we did not do any of the elementary summer academies this year, and so that is where an awful lot of our FTEs have come from in the past. In addition, we usually do 3 whole sections of swim lessons, and we did 1 or 2, Jill, I don't remember. 2 smaller sections as opposed to the 3 sessions that are much more aggressive. Band usually accounts for quite a bit of our summertime, and because they're at that point, that was before the studies came out about how band could happen in COVID era, and so a lot of those practices also didn't happen, and so it's not a surprise that our enrollment is down that much. It is concerning because it's going to impact our revenue limit for certain, because those are students that we get aid on, and now there are significantly less of them. So just wanted to share that with you.
Okay. And Dr. Kielbasa's report was in your packet on seclusion and restraint,
It's here to
and
visit
she's
with us.
here to tell us more about that.
All right, every year, I'm required to bring forward the seclusion and restraint reports for the previous year. And this year, on March 4th of this year, the state came down with some different changes. DPI made some changes to seclusion and restraint because that's been kind of a hot topic in the state. And we, in our district, knew that there were some things that were going to come down, some big changes that were going to come down. One of the changes is not only do we present it to the board, but in December, our seclusion and restraint report goes to the state, which is the first time that's happened. The other change is that when there is a seclusion and restraint incident in a school, they are required to have time to debrief during the day, so that just a couple minutes to talk about what happened, what were those successes, what were those challenges, so that they can really look at how, if they need to change something the next time, they can do that. And then the other third big change was that within 24 hours, if there's a seclusion and restraint incident, we have to notify the parents. And we always notify the parents the same day, whether it's a phone call, an email, or something, but we notify the parents that day. Within 3 days, we're required to give them the written report. In the past, school districts just had to make the report available. We changed a year and a half ago where we send the report out, and it's required by DPI that we send those reports to the parents so that they actually have a copy of that. So those are the big changes that were made by DPI March 4th, just right before we closed for COVID. So all districts have to adhere to that. So what I did up here is looked at the last 3 years, and you're going to see this past year, 2019, 2020, and this is just up until our closure on March 17th. We had 15 incidents of restraints, 21 incidents of seclusion only, 73 incidents that involved both having to be restrained and secluded. We had a total of 109 incidents up until the closure. When you look at the bottom, it talks about that 4th Street had 2 incidents, Red Creek had 107, middle school, high school, and Gebhardt had none. If you could scroll just a little bit farther down, yep, right there. When we look at those 109 incidences, 9 students accounted for 102 of those incidences. And then we had 5 regular ed students that accounted for 5 incidents. So we had 9 total students that accounted for those 102 incidences. When I look at those incidences, that was up until March 17th, but in January, when we opened our new program, 6 of those 9 students moved over to Gebhardt and are part of our new program over there. At this point, 2 of the other students have moved out of district. They came for a short time. They kind of came, last year new, and then they left at the end of the year, and they accounted for a huge amount of those incidents. But at this point, at least 6 of those students are over at Gebhardt in our new EBD offsite program. Jill, if you could scroll a little bit farther. This just shows where most of the incidences are happening. And last year, most of the incidents happened in the classroom. We had 81 incidents in the classroom, 21 in the hallway, 3 playground and recess, 2 in the lunchroom, 1 in the office, and 1 off school grounds. And then for me, it's really interesting to look at, okay, so what time were they happening, so that we can start to see, is there something happening at certain times? When you look at, most of the incidents happen really early, kind of between 8 and 10 in the morning. You've got 14 as they're walking in the door, 22 at 9 o'clock, 14 at 10, 9 at 11, and then you start to get that lunchtime and recess time where you've got 12 at 12, 1 o'clock there's 16, and then 2 o'clock you have 8 incidents. So, and that was up until March. So this report is what we will submit to DPI for Black River Falls.
So I was gonna ask, was there something different about the reporting from the 2 previous years to this year, or this most recent year, that there was such an increase in number, or was it just really those particular new kids that you had mentioned were
Yep.
responsible for so many reasons.
There were two specific, I would tell you that there were two specific students that accounted for a majority of those incidents. They were new students who moved in last year, and were placed with, like grandparents and other things, and they were here for a very short time, and then they were out, so there was a lot of, issues. If those students had been here now, they were scheduled to be over at Gephardt.
Okay.
So, and what I wanted to do is make it real clear so that we could see from year to year to year what it looked like.
How were those kids doing at Gephardt? No.
Very well. Very well. We have not used our seclusion and restraint room at all.
That's amazing.
I had asked Tammy if she would share her building update while she was up talking about this, because honestly, if you recall, last January, we did an awful lot of shuffling with what's happening over at Gephardt, and at our sale meeting earlier, she just had all these pictures of the great things that have happened, and there are some amazing people in that building, and they do great work, but I also want to recognize Tammy because she's created all of these unique programs, but it really has become a community of all of them together. It's not, nope, that's not mine, it's somebody needs help, how can I be there, how can I help? And it just, that building, as I said before when we were talking about the police, used to be visited on a regular basis, and that's not who that building is anymore at all, and that is because of your vision for how you created, but then because of all of the people that you bring in, students, staff, everybody. I just really, that building is just a gem and is serving a lot of really unique needs in our district, and so I'm super appreciative and
we're like a family over there, and the kids all get along really well. You know, we've got our kids in our offsite EBD program, and we've got our kids in Nexus, and we've got our Phoenix kids, and we've got our tutoring kids, but it's really nice how well they all blend together and help each other. The Nexus boys are building picnic tables, and when they're not building, they are helping, and it is so rewarding to see that the boys will come down the hall and help and walk some of our other kids, because we have a lot of kids in the offsite EBD program who are on bikes throughout the building and riding bikes, and there are specifically a couple that have handles where you're walking them up and down the halls, and those kids help us, and they want to be there. And we've got the Nexus boys playing basketball with the offsite EBD program kids. I mean, they all work together and blend together. I mean, it is such a family, and the kids are wonderful. I can't say enough about the kids. I would not want to be in any other building in this district because I love my kids and I love the staff that I have, and they really work together. The boys are building picnic tables. We've got the EBD kids who are working on, have done so much as far as building community and, working in their rooms and doing cooking classes, but including the other kids in the classes. And the kids are wonderful. You can't say enough about our kids, and wonderful. And they just do so much, and our staff is really great. We have, again, just like every building we've had, been really short-staffed lately. Really short-staffed some days. And it hasn't been a huge concern for me because everybody just jumps in. It's not, I can't work this program or I can't work that program. Today we were extremely short because we had a couple people leave and go home sick, and they just jump in and help, and we are able to make it from the start of the day to the end of the day and do it with integrity and fidelity. But it's because everybody jumps in, and it's not this program isn't mine or this program's not mine. They really help each other, and you don't see that everywhere. It's really wonderful.
I'd like to also echo what Dr. Severson said. I mean, the leadership is effective, and you've got a collaborative culture, and it's because of your outstanding leadership. So thank you so much.
Everybody at our building, they are great.
Yeah, it was a big decision last year when what we were going to do.
Oh, I know.
It's a success. Thank you.
So Brandon Jarvis texted me the Red Creek 107 number. He wanted everyone to know so far this year there's been 5.
Wow.
And 3 of those from a student who has now moved over to Gephardt.
Okay. Correct. We just moved another student over to Gephardt.
Well, thank you so
Great.
much, and thank you for your support of all the other schools too, you know, too.
Yep.
When they have issues.
Any other questions with the report?
Okay.
Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you, thank you.
Feel free to start driving.
Okay, social and emotional learning curriculum.
All right, so I have, in your packet, there were several things around this topic. So I do have a presentation, and then we will hit on each of the programs, and you likely saw the scope and sequence in your packet as well. So we'll talk about that when we get there. So wanted to just give you a little bit of the why behind social and emotional learning. And I'm so sorry that you have to cook for me, Jill. Thank you so much for being awesome and doing that. And so social emotional learning is really that process that children and adults acquire effectively apply knowledge, attitudes, skills that are necessary for them to manage their own emotions, understand them, as well as set and achieve goals, show empathy for others, be able to interact positively within relationships. That is kind of the social emotional learning package. And so you can see listed on the slide there kind of 5 core components. That's self-awareness, self-management, the decision-making, all the skills that go within relationships, and then that social awareness. And so those 5 components come from the CASEL organization, which stands for Collaborative Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. The DPI really looks to that organization when it comes to the different components of social and emotional learning, but you'll definitely see those core competencies across social emotional learning wherever it's discussed. So in thinking back to our prioritization of social emotional learning, as some of you engaged in some of the behavior conversations, we definitely talked hard about a need to really make sure that we were consistently and systemically building the toolbox of all students when it comes to this area. And so this visual of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that idea that in order to engage in some of the higher levels of activity, one needs those basic needs towards the bottom met. And so you can kind of see that ability to learn is in that top self-actualization stage, and having some competencies within social emotional learning definitely come below that. And so that ability to have those positive relationships in that esteem area, in that belonging area, even into that safety area with having the ability to regulate one's own emotions and recognize that. So kind of those 3 in the middle: esteem, belonging, and safety. And so another kind of larger why around the importance of SEL, just some national statistics. Students receiving comprehensive SEL instruction have increased their achievement by 11 percentile points on national assessments, or nationally normed assessments. The soft skills that are developed through SEL, that is statistically across the nation, that is exactly what 60% of hiring managers are looking for from a soft skills perspective. We know that locally, our business community, our business partnership, all the work that we've done with them, they're continually talking about that need for solid soft skills, and so I think that national statistic would bear out in our community as well. They also nationally talk about a return on investment that Columbia University found that an $11 return resulted from $1 invested in SEL development with youth. And then a national survey showed that 93% of teachers find that SEL is very important for that idea of learning. And so I share some of that larger national picture, but I also think that definitely, for those of you that participated in some of those conversations, that was definitely something that we heard from teachers as well. So you can go on to the next one, Jill. So when we think about where this fits into our supportive students, we talk, and you heard the ladies that were talking about math talk about tier 2 and tier 3 intervention. So they were talking about that specific support that students need when they don't learn something the first time. And so we think about it in terms of a pyramid that 80 to 90% of our students should get their needs met in the core instruction that we provide. And so that kind of universal. And so sometimes we talk about that as a universal, so something that's systemic, and then that won't meet the needs of all students. but hopefully that's a much smaller percentage that we need to have some additional supports in place for. And then like Dr. Kilbasa was talking about, some of her programming definitely looks more at that tier 3 level. And so thinking about universally what we provide, that is something that we wanted to take a harder look at across the system. So if you go to the next slide, I wanted to kind of fit this all in one spot so you could kind of see the picture. So kind of long before we started having those behavior conversations, this was a direction that we wanted to go. Our counselors and our PBIS teams, or behavior teams at each of the buildings, had talked about it the year before, actually, wanting to gather and start to meet around really writing down some of the systems that we had in place in each of the buildings, and really talking hard about what things were working at different buildings when it came to behavior. We did a lot of that work on the academic side in RTI several years before, and so they really wanted to kind of have a similar process around behavior. And as we talked in that early release meeting, we really found that there was 3 deficit areas across our buildings, and sometimes they manifested themselves a little differently, but it really came to those 3 areas of student self-regulation, so being able to control their own emotions and respond in an appropriate manner, mindset, so having that growth mindset, that grit, that tenacity to persevere, and then executive functioning, which in different buildings looked a little differently, but at the younger levels, that was the ability to problem solve and resolve conflict with a peer. And actually that thread was pretty common throughout that conflict resolution, although it looks a lot different as students get older. But then also part of that executive functioning at the upper levels was being able to appropriately advocate for yourself and communicate your thoughts, feelings, needs appropriately. And so with that in mind, we really talked hard about the fact that we didn't have something as systemic across each of the buildings to address those deficit areas because they were so widespread. And we took a lot of time looking at different data and those kinds of things, and really felt like that was an area that we needed to support more broadly. So each of the behavior teams continued to work back and forth with teachers, talking about how could we support this, what kinds of things could we do, and teachers were continually saying, I feel like we need something that would help us walk through lessons around this with all students. And so when we gathered for the behavior conversation, that definitely was continued to be reiterated, that teachers were definitely looking for something in that regard. And so through December and January, we looked through a variety of resources and kind of brought a whittled down list to the staff in January. And then all staff were able to engage in some presentations to learn a little bit more about those resources. Smaller building teams had done a deeper dive, but then all staff got to have some abridged version presentations. If there were actual resource samples, they got to look at those, and then they voted on which one they felt would be best for their building. And then they spent some time working with myself and the reps to develop some training, which then they engaged in during February professional development time, and then got off the ground in March, right before schools closed. And so unfortunately, some buildings got in 2 lessons, a couple buildings only got in 1. And so our approach last year was a once a week, was kind of our expectation, that it would happen for all students once a week. And it looked different, it had different names. Middle school was Tiger Pride Time, I think, and I can't remember what some of the other buildings had called it. And then actually you can see there March through June, Forest Street had decided in the January, February timelines they were going to kind of create their own. They had some pieces that they felt good about that they were doing, and they wanted a team to kind of come together and pull some of those things together that teachers were already doing in pockets and make it a little bit more systemic. So we had a couple of work days and they're like, holy cow, this is a lot of work to pull all this together ourselves. Could we look at some resources that this is already done for us? And they said, we're willing, but jeepers, this is a lot of work. And so we did that over the closure time. Actually, we met a lot, and we looked at every possible resources for those levels. We started with like 20 and then whittled it down, and eventually the staff got a vote there as well on a final resource. So that was our process. Throughout our process, we use these 2 entities to help us. CASEL that I already talked about, and then the Walls Foundation is also another one that reviews SEL-specific resources, and they give really, really detailed reports. And so I linked, I think, both of them to those little icons if you want to take a look at all the research that is available, and so that really helped us to see what those programs were strong in, and we used those as a first line of defense to say, okay, is it going to heavily address self-regulation and mindset and executive functioning? And if it's not, then that would help us to kind of whittle down a little bit. They're kind of like the ed reports of social emotional learning materials. That was helpful for us. And a lot of teacher input. They were heavily involved in the process because they really believed strongly in it, so that was good as well. So this is where we landed. Forest Street and Red Creek happened upon positive action, which was interesting. Red Creek decided that in January time, and then Forest Street was like, well, we were hearing really good things about it from our colleagues, but we really want to go through the whole process ourselves, and then they landed in the same place. But it was great that they went through the whole process because there's a lot of really cool stuff out there, and so you can see there kind of what it looks like. It is face-to-face lessons with some role-playing, puppets, which was something that they as buildings were looking for as much hands-on practice as possible. The research is really strong around students practicing these skills when they're not in the heat of the actual moment and then being able to rely on that muscle memory to kick in when it actually happens to them. So you can see the structure there. There are 140 lessons within this program. There are 50 key lessons that teachers are implementing with fidelity, and then they can pick and choose from all the other ones based on the needs of their classroom. So there's a wide variety of differentiation possible. Middle school, they landed on second step. And so just to share, I should have said this in the beginning and I apologize that I didn't. Just to remind you, K6, we have a guidance class that students engage in as a special in their music, art, and PE rotation that is taught by the guidance counselor. They use the second step resource K5 actually, and so this was a nice logical step to also incorporate into the middle school social emotional support for all kids. So you can see kind of how that looks there. Coming back to school, you can see that, as I shared before, at the end of the year we had decided to do it once a week. That has definitely increased with the recognized effects of isolation that students experienced over the spring and summer. We have felt a need to give them more tools in their toolboxes, and so that time has increased a little bit across all the buildings and has been helpful. And then the high school landed on School Connect. Actually, the writers of this program wrote second step, and so there's a really nice continuity for skill development across our system, which kind of happened not necessarily by accident. I definitely knew those things and shared them forward, but people really appreciated this one at the high school because it is the only resource out there that is written specifically for high school students. It's not a K-12 program or even a 6-12 program. It's written especially for high school students, and so there are some lessons that are a little cheesy, but for the most part, even students have said it's good to have these conversations, and teachers really appreciate a lot of the structure that's there to help them as they're talking through these skills with students. So again, you can see the implementation there, that it happens during advising. And then Gebhardt landed on the Why Try resource, and so they as an entire building utilize that resource, and so as they are implementing the lessons, no matter what program a student is in, they're talking about some of the same skills across those 10 units, and so I think that's been a great strength. And so, again, just wanting to kind of remind of the reasons why we landed on social emotional learning and kind of the support and structures that we're putting in place through developing all students with a universal approach. And how that is reiterated and supported through, you can see the surrounding circles of the classroom, the school, and of course, the homes. Did you have any questions?
I jotted down a few things and I went and looked online at the resources using, which are interesting. So I guess I'm wondering, we're doing this in school, is there communication for families at home or for what the kids are learning, or what the principles are that we're trying to teach?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So each of the programs have some scripted letters that they come with, and there is a team at each of the buildings that kind of looks at the program. They've worked hard to do some scoping out of the lessons across the year, and I've also handled some of that parent communication too, to say we're going to take this piece from this letter, but we're going to make it sound like our own, some of those pieces. And so usually those are counselors are on those teams and teachers, and usually there's at least a principal that has been part of that work.
So family family can be on the same page.
Absolutely, yes. Most of them have a specific parent component of here's what we worked on, here's what you can work on at home. So, great question.
And I have one more question. When you look at the tiers, we talk about differential learning. So if 80% of the kids are doing fairly well, it looks like you're spending 20 minutes a day, K through 8, on this.
And I don't think that we will always do that. As I said, we originally had planned on doing once a week, but knowing that we have a lot of social skills that kids did not use for a long time, wanting to kind of beef that up at the beginning of the year. So I do think we'll probably revisit that a little bit. But
so if there are students that are doing really well and seem to get a grasp on this, they still do the 20 minutes a day in SEL, along with everyone else.
Yes, and so we have a lot of data that shows that student belonging is still a really big need for our area. And so I would especially say that at our upper levels, but across the board, that need for, and if you remember that pyramid, that belonging is right in the middle. And so we still have a lot of data that shows that need, even if they're performing those things, they're also part of that community. And so being part of those conversations are really important.
Any more questions or comments? Well, thank you for the update and the review. Thank you.
Sure, I'll just stay up here because I'm the next
Okay,
thing
yeah,
on the agenda.
standard-based
Mary Jo wants to
education.
join me.
Do you want me up there with you?
Sure.
Or from here?
We can tag team on my phone. So Mary Jo and I wanted to give you a short presentation around standards-based education. She has been joining us on the advisory committee since we started our work in January, February timeframe, and so just wanted to update the board on the work of that group. So what we're going to quickly go over together is kind of a brief overview of what standards-based education is, why we have prioritized it, what processes we've been through to guide our efforts, what support is in place for teachers, and then have a little conversation with you all about how to include you in the process moving forward. So there is a lot on this slide, but we really wanted to show you that standards-based education is really all of these things encompassed. And so I'll give you just a minute to look through the bullets instead of talking at you while you're trying to read. As you read from left to right there, you can see a lot of the bullets under instruction and assessment, even under grading, are things that are likely not new to the board, things that we have been talking about for the last several years, moving towards rigorous differentiated instruction, incorporating growth mindset with students, having high levels of thinking happening in the classroom, lots of application, rubrics being used in classrooms as a way to get feedback. So a lot of the things that we have been working on is part of that standards-based education. And so grading is definitely a piece of that as well. When we think about the best ways to get feedback to students, the fact that we want it to guide teacher instruction. And so the grading piece, when we talk about reporting how student performance, there are different ways to do that. And so sometimes people will talk about standards-based grading as just grading, but we really wanted to talk about the fact that this is a much broader thing that is incorporating lots of different kinds of high quality instruction, assessment practices, and then the reporting is definitely a part of that greater package. And so we found this video that we thought said it pretty well, and so this is another school district, not us, and so anytime it says, I don't remember what it was, Federal Way Public Schools, it definitely exemplifies the direction that we're going in, so we wanted to share that. It's only 5 minutes, we promise it's not long.
You know, nothing.
Within education throughout Washington State and the nation, a change is occurring. A move from what worked to what more can be achieved. This change is about shaping and all children are prepared to succeed. Within the Federal Way Public School District, the most significant change has come in the form of instructing, grading, and assessing students' academic achievements. It's called standards-based education, grading, instruction, and assessment.
My name is Marie Verhar, and I am the Executive Director of Teaching for Learning. Standards-based education is leveling the playing field for all of our students. So whether the student is a third grader at one elementary or a third grader at another elementary, we want to make certain that our students leave third grade, regardless of the school they're attending, and move into fourth grade with the same set of skills.
In 2004, Federal Way Public Schools embraced the state and national learning standard for grades K through 12. It was this change that posed new challenges for the teachers and administrators throughout the district.
I'm Patricia Nesbitt. I teach at Sahali Middle School in Federal Way Public Schools, and I teach 8th grade STEM humanities. Well, 3 challenges that I face when implementing the standard-based education was first my students. They had a difficult time with the retake and redoing assignments because it was a new process. So the traditional way of testing and getting an A, B, C, or D, or even failing, you would move on. But now with the standard-based education, we have reteaching, we have more practice, extended time to learn. The greatest benefit of all is that it addresses the achievement gap. And the standards clearly state and address what all kids need to learn and to achieve. So it increases student performance and it helps all kids learn.
The newly adopted standards-based education approach is more than just a new way of recording a child's progress in school. It's about creating a commitment that teachers, administrators, and the district will give each child every opportunity to succeed in school.
One of the things that we did year before last is we did speak to many, many colleges, not just in the state of Washington, but actually across the nation. Because we wanted to make sure in Federal Way that we were doing nothing to jeopardize our students' chances at a four-year university. We wanted to make certain that we were setting our students up for success.
Change is a learned process, and throughout its implementation, teachers and administrators have been meeting and assessing one another to discover the best way to make these new grading practices consistent and workable across all subjects and at all grade levels. Parents who need help understanding the standards-based system have an ally in teachers, principals, and district officials.
My name is Stacy Lucas, and I'm the principal of Nautilus K-8. The very first thing that we did to help parents and students understand standards-based education is we held a coffee chat, and parents were able to come in and just ask questions. Most of them were very accepting of the standards. The grading system was new, so it was changed. They just needed to learn about it.
Well, in the beginning, our parents really wanted the traditional ABC categories in the report card and the grading, and it took some adjustment in time and lots of conversation clarifying the purpose of standard-based education and grading. And once those conversations were had, I think they got a better understanding, and they were able to see that it was beneficial.
I was able to see this all come together last year. We introduced the standards, we taught to the standards, we assessed the standards, and the most exciting thing was getting our test scores back this summer. I'm going to use science for an example. We specifically taught the standards in science, and our science scores went way up. What I'm most excited about is the reports that we're able to send home to parents. It shows what learning targets have been assessed. It shows what they've mastered, what the students are able to do. I think standards-based education has given us the opportunity to give parents more information than we've ever been able to give to them before.
The goal is to create the best education framework possible for all children. But this new change is the foundation in which tomorrow's education is built.
For more information about standards-based education, please visit the Federal Way Public School website at www.fwps.org.
One of the first tasks that our group did was decide on our purpose for grading, and it's the next slide, Jill. And we decided on this. The primary purpose of assessment and grading is to communicate to students and families the level of achievement a student has demonstrated on standards or skills. And assessment also informs teachers' instruction to ensure high levels of learning for all students. And that's what any grading does. Next slide, please. In the video, they talked about commitments, and we identified 4 areas that we wanted to establish commitments for, and they were schools, teachers, families, and students. And for our schools, we put that we will ensure equitable access to grade level standards and skills, establish a clear understanding of learning outcomes for each grade level or course, regular review students' current strengths and learning needs related to grade level outcomes to provide optimal supports, and implement intervention and enrichment systems to serve student needs. Our teacher commitment would be to collaborate to ensure consistent outcomes for all students within a grade level or course, use a consistent system of assessment and feedback to drive instruction, provide consistent feedback to students and parents on the student's level of achievement, provide relevant and engaging instruction aligned with the standards and instructional best practices, and ensure high levels of learning on essential standards for all students. Next slide, please. And our families also have a commitment that they will actually engage in the learning process of the students, that they will use the information provided on progress to support student learning and engagement, and partner with the school and teacher to ensure the highest level of student success. And also students have to take ownership. So that was the first one on our commitments, was that they actually do take ownership of their learning. They actively participate in relevant and high quality instruction to learn grade level standards and feel success, experience continuous growth and have higher levels of achievement, have clarity in what they need to know and to be able to do, and self-reflect on their current level of achievement and understand next steps in learning. And one of the really interesting things that in this type of grading is that it's not a one-shot deal on mastery for the standards. You know, in our traditional school system, you get the one shot of mastery. What you have is what you have. In this standards-based education, they have multiple attempts to master that. You don't just one and done. I really like that about it.
So I know that you've seen this before, but just wanted to remind kind of that overall timeline. That last year we kind of started this work from an advisory committee standpoint. This school year is optional professional learning for teachers. A variety of opportunities are available for them. Next year, there will be required professional development that will be kind of woven into our professional development schedule across the year. And then the following year would be our implementation of this kind of complete package.
And our committee will continue to work, and some of the things we want to do is to get a communication plan, communicating with all those 4 subgroups that we saw on the previous slides, solidifying principles and practices, setting implementation and learning goals for the 21-22 year and beyond, grading management system decisions, and determining and outlining learning needs of stakeholders. At each committee or each meeting, we work on these.
So then just to remind you of some of the learning opportunities that are available for teachers, there are some book studies that are happening throughout the year. So we're in the middle of the first one right now, September through November, and then there's another one December through February, another one March through May. And so they all kind of stand alone, that teachers don't have to have read the first book in order to engage in the second or the third. They do participate in the book study digitally in the evening hours. And so if that's something anyone is interested in joining when the next one comes up in December or in March, let me know. Then we also have after-school learning sessions around the topics that are listed there. And I do have the same handout that was in the information that had all of this at the beginning of the year. I printed out extra copies of that, so if you're interested in any of these, I'll leave them on the table here for you to pick up. Those are right after school once a month, the 4th Monday of the month.
And involvement of the board moving forward. I wondered if every month during that time where we have conference workshop reports, would you like me to give an update of what we just did in the last month? Would that be a way to update you on what we're doing? the best time. And then Stephanie did say that I think 4 of you signed up for books.
Yep, and I ordered them, and I gotta admit, I was really not thinking. I ordered them, and then I threw her papers away, and so that's not super helpful. I remember Patty's, because hers was the last one I ordered, but I did print off the booklet, so if you're a visual person and you remember, oh, I think it was over on this side.
It was the one Mary Jo recommended. It's the one I.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Well, then we'll have to here, so I have 2 more to be claimed, and the lists are right here, so I will leave that for you.
And if anyone else that didn't order a book would like one, I'm sure Stephanie would be glad to order one.
Sorry about that.
It's an interesting reading.
Here, I was checking it off the list, and I apologize for that.
This may be a very simplistic way to look at it, but it reminds me of when our kids were in kindergarten, and it would have all the, like, baking out monkey tent, you know, and all these,
Very
goals for them at
concrete,
the
measurable.
end. Yes.
Everything you can measure what they know.
Yeah.
Exactly each skill.
I promise it won't be as long every month, but
Okay.
we've been working for a while, so we wanted
Okay.
to give you the update. Thank you, Mary Jo.
You're welcome. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
And is it also sort of similar, like, I remember in elementary school, and I'm sure it's continued beyond that, where they would have a rubric, and it would, if you wanted it to do outstanding, you know, you had to meet these particular goals, and it averages these particular goals, and so on, and then they'd get like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I try to talk people out of always seeking the A, like, because I've met your expectations, that doesn't mean an A. If you meet the expectations, that's, you know, great, you're at the standard, but then there needs to be room for somebody who's well above the expectation, like, you know, so.
Well, I remember Mr. Wester, and
Oh, choice work, yeah, I know where you're going with that.
if you met the expectation, you got a C.
Yep, that's, yeah.
If you wanted a B or an A, you had to do more than that.
Yep. This is a little different.
I think it's really important when you get to the parent part to make it, not in educational language.
Correct.
My grandkids have, they're doing this, and when they read through the report card, it's all this like, okay, well, so what did they learn? I can't figure it out. You know, so I think that'll be an important communication part.
That's great. Great information. And Stephanie and I talked that this could be pushed back, you know, with COVID now. You don't know. I don't want to put anything else on teachers right now, but.
Is it just at the high school that and in some classes that this is being used? I'm just wondering how widespread it is at this point.
So the high school definitely had some people that got super excited about it last year and worked through some trials. In fact, Stephanie's always been doing this dance between how much do I pull them back to let the rest of the district catch up versus, you know, squashing them and not letting them move forward. But there have been some conversations the rest of the way through, but I would say that group at the high school is probably the most.
Some elementary too.
Yeah, yeah. To the elementary, it's not as much of a stark difference as it is to their current practice at the high school, perhaps, and so that's why it feels so unique there. But good stuff.
Okay, we'll move on to finance and facilities, and the expenditures were in your packet. Any questions or anything you want discussed? Okay, is there a motion to approve the monthly expenditures?
I move to approve the expenditures.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Thanks. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carried. Referendum information update.
Right, just wanted to give you an update on the many ways we're trying to get the message out there. Jill and I, last Monday, happened to have been a couple of municipalities the same night, and so we split and each went separate directions, but tomorrow night is that next virtual referendum meeting at 6 p.m. You can either join Facebook Live or there's a link on our website. Each time that we give the presentation, there's really not a lot of questions. There really isn't. The one question that I've gotten is, what kind of system are you going to put in the high school? Is it going to be another hot water or forced air or boiler? And so it's going to be hot water is the answer there. And then I've had one individual say, what are you going to do with that? I know that basement at the high school and the water issues, what are you going to do if it doesn't pass? And so honestly, there's just not a lot of people with questions around the topics. And so we will keep it going forward. We've got social media posts scheduled out until that day. I keep using my Spotlight on Schools. WWIS last week was kind enough to call, and we recorded 3 separate interviews that all joined together that they are wanting to highlight. And to be honest, the only feedback that we've gotten is that, boy, this is really well put together and feels like you've got a good plan. And I've heard kudos to the board for putting the community in that in this current situation to have the opportunity to correct all of those needs without having to increase that debt levy. So there's not a lot to update unless you have been hearing questions from people that we can pass on. They asked us today, we had our communication meeting, they said, do you want to create a frequently asked questions? I'm like, there aren't any. So it's going to be a short paper, but again, we just never know if that's because people don't care or because they already know the answers. I don't know that.
Or could be they
info in mailboxes today.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I haven't been home, so I don't
Did you
know.
guys get anybody check your mail today? Did you get? It's a okay. It's a 8.5 by 11, and it's got some great charts on it about the state average mill rate, and then us compared to all of our neighbors. And it's a lot of the same referendum type information, but the financial information was put out just a little bit differently. And the print shop emailed Wednesday that they were ready for mailboxes, and so they thought they would hit Saturday, and we didn't see it, and I haven't been home yet today, but hopefully soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Certification of the annual tax levy and budget modifications need to be dealt with separately, but you got them in one, so.
Right, they're all on one sheet together, so if that's okay, I'll talk about them together.
I did the agenda, she did the items, so I separated, she put them together.
You do your thing.
They kind of just go together.
Yeah,
so
they
it's
do.
Hard. I'll go to the detail about Fund 10. So a lot of the changes that you're approving for the revisions or amendments are, we got our final numbers. We had our final student count in September. October 15th, we received our equalization aid amount, so then we can plan for what our tax levy is. So you can see what the adjustment is there in Fund 10. Open enrollment out, I was, I guess, overzealous in thinking that we would have, I'm sorry, this is supposed to be open enrollment in, that's inaccurate, because this is a revenue. I was overzealous in thinking of how many ins we were going to have. I was looking at the trend of what we've had, and we are way down from that. So I took the opportunity with some growth in our revenue limit to adjust that revenue. Our state equalization aid, the estimate I had, I was off by about 64,000, so we're actually getting a little bit more. These are some other adjustments, just truing up some grants that we received. The 53,000 will be the final amount for our safety grant. That's our last phase 2, and that has to be spent out actually by December 31st, so that is in the works. The ESSER funds and the year funds were both from the CARES Act, so those have both been added to the budget. Those are federal funds coming in, and then everything down below matches in the form of expenditures to those revenues. We did allow some building carryover from 1920 as we were kind of shut down, basically, here purchasing supplies and things. So they did have minor purchasing going on, but really they had significant pieces of their budgets left in their building, so I allowed them to carry them over to this year. Any questions on any of the Fund 10 items? And then in Fund 20, we adjusted the Indian Education Grant to true that up by increasing it by $14,000, both revenue and expense. The debt service in Fund 39, increasing by 120 over what had been estimated. And then, and these are, when I say estimated, those were the original amounts from June, not compared to what you approved October 6th. And then adding the $10,000 for Fund 80 that we had talked about on October 6th as well. So what that tax levy looks like is this area here from what was originally spelled out in June and approved by you in June. So we're really just switching from what was estimated in the general fund at $6,075,000 down to $6,055,000, and the debt service is actually going up by just about $20,000. So just that switch. This creates that mill rate still of $898. That hasn't changed. So the tax levy overall is the same amount, just swapping between where it's coming from. And then these are all the adjustments that I just talked about, and in the format we have to have them formally approved in. Are there any questions on any of that?
We'll address each one separately here. So we need certification of the annual tax levy.
I make a motion to approve the certification of the annual tax levy.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you, Jill. And now we'll move on to the budget modification as presented. Is there a motion to approve? Okay, Scott. Is there a second?
I'll second that one too.
Thank you. Any questions or further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion carried. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you. These amounts will be in the annual meeting booklet
Yeah,
on
next,
Monday night
yeah,
as well.
yeah. Next Monday night. Okay. Policy Committee Board Report. We have a number of first readings for you. We did meet for our meeting in October, and our community representative is changed after many years. Carl Herman has retired from our committee, as you know, last year, and Dr. Marcus Lewis replaced him. So, Marcus Lewis. Okay, so we'll do the first readings and just want to go through them. Okay.
Sure. So the first one is some updates. It used to be called Student or Equal Education Opportunities, and I'm suggesting that we rename it to Student Non-Discrimination. That is more in alignment with what the WASB attorneys recommend, and it really encompasses more of the individual groups of kids. For example, it specifically calls out the students that are protected by the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Act, and also talks about religious beliefs. In the past, we've had a whole bunch of policies that mention those in small amounts, and this one is a little bit more comprehensive. So if you are, I always feel like if someone is looking for a policy, the name of the policy should, lead them there. And so equal education opportunities could be anything. This really is student non-discrimination. So regardless of what the protected category is, that name is general enough that it would call your attention to it. And so those are the recommended changes from the policy committee. The next one is called school admissions, and it is taken quite a few changes. It used to be, so a student that is identified as a student with a disability can be educated through public education until age 21. While other individuals at age 18, they don't have to come anymore. If there's a student who's already enrolled with us and ages to 19, we will let them finish. Where this becomes a thing is we've had students who were technically dropouts with their graduating class and will do nothing for 2 years and then come back and say, I'd really like a Black River Falls High School diploma, and we don't have a means to take those students back in. And so the previous policy, somebody said, well, it says 20 years old and I'm 20, and so why can't I come back? Because it talks about continuous education and no break and that kind of stuff. So this has been updated with the current law in regards to enrolling students. Any questions?
So, Shelley, both of these were changed to update. There was a class 1 legal something on the one I meant to ask about. I wasn't quite sure what that meant. That right there.
Oh, yep, so the student non-discrimination, each fall we have some annual notices that Marty takes care of in the Banner Journal each year. And so this is one of those pieces that our notice of student non-discrimination needs to be published in our annual notices. And so Marty's got a list of those that goes out each year. It also goes into our student handbooks, but that the class 1 legal means that we use our local media for it.
Okay. And so these were mostly updates to comply with current laws?
Yes. Yes. I was reading through the 400s, and these are what I found. The next one, honestly, is a moot point at this point. It says release time for religious instruction. And this was first created in 1983, and then it was revised in 1990. Our community does not currently have any religious organizations who have programming during the school day on a regular basis where kids would be asked to pull out. And even if we did, that would be a whole different conversation. Example I can think of. this one and the next policy that I'm both suggesting that we eliminate because they're just not used ever. An example for the next one, there's a family who used to pick up their child and take them up to, Sylvan Learning Center. And that student would be released from school every single day because that was an arrangement that they had with the school that this wasn't going to count as truancy because we knew exactly where they were going and it was in the best interest. We make those arrangements now and don't necessarily need a specific policy that says for religious reasons they can, but because that implies for non-religious reasons they couldn't, and it just got, it's not necessary is the long and short of it. So I am recommending that we delete that policy. And the next one is the release of elementary students for participation in programs and activities. So this talks about they may not be released from reading, math, physical ed for participation in other scheduled programs or activities. So what I liken this to is so students have they're with their elementary classroom, and these are the people that this is their homeroom teacher and their schedule. And a student is part of the safety patrol, and sometimes they need to leave 15 minutes early at the end of class because they need to go participate in safety patrol. We try very hard to schedule around their core area classes, but it felt very odd to have a policy that says reading, math, and Phi Ed are the three golden ones that you can't possibly pull from. I'm not sure why in 1980 that felt necessary, but I will tell you that those decisions are always made. What are the core area classes? Let's avoid those at all costs and see what other things we can pull them from. And then the fact that it was just for elementary students, if we really felt that strongly about reading, art, and Phi Ed, why would it be just elementary, not the rest of the district's students? So I didn't find any purpose for keeping this policy. Questions? All right. Next one is student dress code. You may remember that this fall when, or this summer, when you approved each of the student handbooks, there were some significant changes to the dress code in there. I felt like Mr. Solheim had done some great work in doing some research behind dress codes and language usage and all of that stuff, and so it felt appropriate to adjust our district policy on it as well. I'll give you the abbreviated version. The part that is, could you scroll down a little bit? All the way. So that part that was the entirety of the policy before, which led to each student handbook having, here's the things you cannot wear, here's the things you can wear, and as we talked about when we did the handbooks, it was, here's a list of things girls can't do, and then there would be like one or two things that related to boys. And Mr. Solheim appropriately said, this feels very sexist, that we are, controlling this in all the wrong ways. And so we updated the dress code to be more inclusive so that each one of their handbooks doesn't need to have as much of the can do this, can't do that, can do this, can't do that. Instead, the policy gives some big picture ideas, such as number 2, any clothing that depicts, promotes, or advertises alcohol, illegal drugs, tobacco, nicotine products, criminal activity that would threaten any person's health, safety, or property, including unlawful possession, criminal gang affiliation activity, profanity, pornography, racism, or violence that would constitute a violation of law or school rules. So if that is in policy, then we don't need to, it just feels like this is far more guiding in the direction that the handbooks are going as opposed to the very general paragraph that existed before. Student conduct on school buses, not a lot of other changes, just really updating it to our current practice and put some of the responsibility on the student before it says, therefore the board shall require students to conduct themselves, and I think that the students should be required to conduct themselves. You're not going to be there to do that part. Anyway, it also says that all the student handbooks will have this information, and it also talks about the driver and when they're in, it's reasonable to expect supervision. We sometimes get calls from families that there's problems happening at the bus stop, and they're frustrated with us that we can't manage the behaviors at the bus stop. We're not at the bus stop in the morning before the bus pulls up, and so this just provided some additional clarity that from the time the student is on the bus until they depart, we absolutely recognize that behavior is ours to manage, but we can't do all of those bus stops. So. And the next one is, it used to be called student search activity, or no, locker searches is what it was called, and then the policy recommended being a little bit more inclusive as to other types of searches that happen at school. And so added that there are some lockers, there are the student or their personal belongings, vehicles, and then specifically about the K-9 units. I believe the board is aware that we sometimes use the K-9 units. There was nothing in policy before that explicitly said that, and so it felt responsible to put that in there. So it just really, I'll tell you, the electronic searches are an ongoing conversation. If somebody is reported or somebody makes a complaint about some electronic type of bullying, this is very clear that we do not have the right to make a student open up their phone and give us that information. And so the policy is just far more inclusive than just lockers and includes a lot more of the searches. And that is one thing that as new principals starts, that is often an awful lot of the questions that they have, like what does reasonable suspicion mean and all of those things. And so we define reasonable suspicion and talk through the idea that we do not have the same standard as a law enforcement officer because we are in education. Any questions, comments, concerns with those policies? Might I also ask permission of the board, and I'm sorry to do this, but it has just been a really busy time with the referendum and COVID and some family things. We're supposed to have our next policy committee the first week in November, which is right before the election. Would it be okay if we didn't do that one the first week in November and we can cycle back the next time?
I thought we were going every other month.
We were. This was September. That's why the board's getting in October, isn't it?
No, this was October.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So then maybe we're not scheduled till December. I'm sorry. I thought I looked at it and was panicking that next week I would have to put policies together because that's not going to be reasonable next week.
Right.
So
yeah.
okay, my mistake then. I really thought it was
okay.
coming up.
So review these. If you have any questions or changes, we'll approve these at our next meeting, and this is the first reading.
All right, and then you had asked for an update on the food service accounts and the Angel Fund, so I just put together some information for you. I'm not sure if everyone is aware that each year when school starts in the fall, there's a 30-day grace period, so however a student was categorized as free or reduced in the spring, that carries over for the first 30 days in the fall. Typically that we are really aggressive about that because it takes a lot of families by surprise. Even though we send things out, they don't necessarily, I'm unsure, but they don't usually respond until they start growing a negative balance, and then we are not able to feed their child. And so this year is different because of the USDA making the decision to maintain the free meals. And so to be honest, we were a little bit concerned because that free and reduced rate is a number that is used heavily in school funding. Our Title I allocation comes in large part because of our free and reduced student population, and because families weren't falling into the negative balance, we had fewer families filling out that form, so we were concerned. There are other community organizations that use our district demographics in their grant applications as well, the Extension Office and the Ho-Chunk Nation and other groups as well. So that was concerning. And then Joey also does what's called a direct certification, meaning that anyone who is applying for any kind of assistance, she can mesh her report with that report like every single week, and anybody who qualifies for that federal or governmental assistance automatically qualifies as free or reduced. And so our current rate is still at about 55%, which is really in alignment with where we have been in recent years. I am not positive that it's still an accurate reflection of our community currently, but it is as close as we can get right now. So we have had some people who have still come in to pay their negative balances when we call, but that number is certainly smaller. And so you can see that the current negative balance of our active students is 31,000. I would remind everybody that 1 year ago, when we started the whole conversation in July, that number was way more than double that. And so we recouped an awful lot of funds last year from September to March, because we certainly didn't do any of that collection during COVID as well. And so I would say that it's okay that we hit the pause button this year, because we feel like we have a good process that was effective that we can go back to when the world rights itself, and we feel like that's the right thing to do. So any other questions about the lunch balances or the Angel Fund or any of those things? All right.
enrollment for,
Right, I also wanted to share the enrollment picture with you, and so, it's awkward the way I put it on there, it's so long, you can't see it all. Thank you, Bill. So you can see that unfortunately we are down 30 students this year, and we knew that we were going to be in declining enrollment, but we were unsure exactly how many. This number does not take into account open enrollment. These are people who live within our boundaries, and so I just want to be clear about that. It's 30 less, and that has nothing to do with people choosing to open enroll one way or the other. It just means that there are 30 less school-aged children living within the boundaries of the school district. You can see how we've fluctuated over time. Looks like 2001 we were at an all-time high, but the overall picture has continued to get a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller as we've gone down. And then we do the open enrollment for you as well. Sorry, that is our overall enrollment. So you can see how that is.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Picture worth 1,000 words. I could just put that up and not talk at you. And there it is by grade level if you're interested. I don't know if that is interesting for you to look at, but it's available in your packet if you you can see the bubble classes as they move across to all of the different grade levels, and you can also see those real small groups and how they go. And when we graduated, well, this year our senior class is 154, and you can see that the 11th grade is only 127, unless we have a large kindergarten group that really sets us up for another big hit next year. And the way our revenue limit goes, it's off a 3-year rolling average, but with the 30 students this year and the potential for a large group next year, we could be in some very dire spot if we're losing students that fast.
The only good news about the 30 students, if there is a good news of declining enrollment, is a lot of them were 4K, so they only count for half the FTE. So not as quite as impactful as 30, but still.
Do you think that, so you said that's not actually kids who are enrolled, it's just in the district? So those 4K numbers.
Can you just tell me more about that? I don't understand what you just said.
So when we look at FTEs for the revenue limit, 4K only counts as a half a student. So we had quite a drop from one 4K year to this year, but since they only count for half, it's if we're counting heads, it's not as impactful.
And so is that 30 as heads? Sorry, I didn't understand that. You can see how last year, so this year's kindergarten, look at what a huge bubble that is. And that's why last year we were renting offsite space for our 4K program because we had that huge bubble there. I didn't understand what you
This is certainly an anomaly though, if you look at the other years.
And we absolutely know that some families were saying, I'm not gonna do 4K virtual, I'm just gonna not enroll. And so that most definitely happened with our 4K kids. All right, and then the open enrollment, and I'm going to remind you, it is first of all not a very good picture, but second, this fluctuates throughout the entire year. Every single week I sign some in and out, and ironically by the end of the year it ends up being a little bit more of a wash than it looks right now. But we did have, just today I got an email from a family who open enrolled out of the school district of Black River Falls to do Medford's virtual academy, so not using our virtual stuff, but wanting to use another full virtual. And she emailed me yesterday saying, this isn't working, we'd really like to connect back with the district. And so there's 3 kids that were in open enroll out who are now getting registered here. So it really is a constant state of flux. We did have more people open enroll out into full virtual programming. I'm very confident that COVID and the uncertainty of what that was going to be throughout the course of the year played a significant factor in that. Unfortunately, we were making some great progress on our open enrollment ratio. This year is not good, and it only made me feel a little bit better that it wasn't the worst years, that there was 3 worse years. So
This is an outlier this year for a lot of things.
I think it will. It's going to be tough when you analyze data. I think 2020 is always going to have an asterisk by it, don't you think? Yes. Any questions about the enrollment picture? Okay.
Thank you for that update. We'll move on to reports. The meeting minutes were in your packet. Is there a motion to approve that or anything you want discussed?
I would like to make a comment on the minutes. So I went back, reviewing some things, and I noticed that the discussion regarding within Hunter and mental health was in there. But when I go back and look at minutes, I'll look at the agenda items too. The 6.5 was missing out of the agenda along with the copy of the grant. And I don't know if it's possible to add that in or to put that, when I look back, it takes hours to go through minutes and try to tease things out and look for the information you're looking for. And I did that several times over different things this last week.
You mean in the, where it's the board meeting where you click on and get all of your packet?
Right. You can get just like our board packet.
Yeah.
But that 6.5 and the written copy of the grant, the written copy of the grant was not in the one.
6.5 from what year? Like,
The last meeting. It's, you know, the little agenda items, we have 9.1, 9.2, it was 6.5 that was missing from the board packet last meeting.
You say missing, but sometimes I don't put items in there.
Okay.
And just,
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
remember from last time, I'm gonna
Yeah.
look it up right now, but
Yeah.
sometimes I don't put items in.
Sure,
Yeah.
but that's kind of critical, I think, especially that, the copies of the documents, and so, that's not part of the minutes. I'm wondering, you know, when there are those copies of documents, to be able to go back and look at them and review would be helpful, and I don't know if that can be part of the minutes, or.
Minutes?
Or if something is presented, perhaps added to our packet, that, is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is, if, so the copy of the grant was presented at our meeting under agenda item 6.5. Agenda item 6.5 was not saved in the packet for last meeting.
It is in my packet, so I'm not sure why I think it carried over to Moodle. It's in the stuff that I
Is
prepared.
that,
I'm looking
so
at it
that
right
would be
now.
nice to have.
And so normally it would be, it was
Yeah.
probably just an
Yeah.
error, or I added it late after Marty had already posted to Moodle. I'm not sure how that happened, but usually I prepare it on our network.
Yeah.
And I say, Marty, already, it's all you, and then she puts it on Moodle,
Yeah.
is what usually
I'm not,
happens.
I don't know how it happened.
No, I just am explaining, yep,
Yeah.
just letting you know.
I
it's
just would
here.
like that in there so that if I, you know, or if any of us wants to go back and review the information that's available.
And so that is what Moodle is supposed to be. It is supposed to
Right.
be that long-term record of the conversations that are had here. There are times when things are presented, for example, the standards-based education piece, that was not in your board packet because that was a conversation that they just wanted to share with you.
Sure.
If I get a handout from somebody in a meeting, I give it to Marty, ask her to scan it in and put it into Moodle, so that really is a collection of all of the stuff, at least, even if it's not a word for word transcript of the conversation. So yes, it should certainly be in there. I will correct that. Perfect.
And that's saved as a permanent document
On
or
Moodle,
for a
yep.
long time?
Yep, and so, yes.
I mean, when I looked, I can go back 2, 3, 4 years, I just wondered how long it went back. You know,
Forever. Since we started
My memory's not that good.
Since we started using Moodle.
Right.
I'm really, so it used to be that the superintendent would keep this binder with everything that was said and done, and we now, I don't.
Which is really nice not to have all that paper.
Yeah.
But I just wanted, I just noticed that and wanted to make sure that was there, so if I have a question again, I can go back and look.
Yeah. So I'm looking at it, and it was uploaded on 9/21, and so maybe that was after you'd already done some other pieces. I'm not sure, but I don't know for sure either. I will fix it up. Yep.
Was that after our meeting then?
No.
Oh, it was before the meeting, so, and you looked at it like just
Today.
recently?
But just because it's,
Okay.
it's a manual process, and so we've actually talked about whether we should just do a Google Drive so that I can put the stuff in there myself. I could learn how to do Moodle, but it's much faster for me to say, Marty, it's ready to go, and then she does the postings and stuff.
Happens, that's why we have
Yeah.
the minutes.
Yep, exactly. So.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on. Oh,
We
we have,
did approve the
we
minutes.
didn't, okay, we need a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you. Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye, opposed. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to Dr. Severson's report.
I'm not gonna lie, I got nothing. I've talked a lot tonight, and
Yes,
we've
you
talked
have.
a lot at you,
Yes.
and you've heard about all the,
We've had a lot of updates and
Yep.
reports, that's
Yep.
for sure. Okay.
Oh, buildings did send something to Stephanie though.
We did. All right. Now they're watching to see how well I present their information. All right, so I'll start with 4th Street. Melanie wanted me to share with you that 4th Street will be celebrating Unity Day on Wednesday. Staff and students will be wearing orange. to take a stand against bullying. And so the phrase is make it orange and make it end. And so they are all wearing orange in solidarity against bullying. They are also going to be practicing a school-wide intruder drill this week. Sorry, had to read for detail. And they have invited all of you, as well as local law enforcement, who are participating as well. And then they are very ecstatic for their October 29th Student Career Day. And so students dress up as what they would like to be when they grow up. And so that will be coming up on October 29th. Then I will switch to Red Creek. We have a picture. Thank you, Jill. They celebrated Fire Prevention Week with a fundraiser. So as you know, Fire Prevention Week is celebrated in October. Around the anniversary of the Chicago and Peshtigo wildfires of 1871. And so they worked with our local fire department and they did a fundraiser activity this past Thursday. So they did a Chuck-a-Duck station where students were able to purchase a rubber duck to throw into the pond. And then classes from each grade level that landed the most ducks got a chance to duct tape their teacher to the wall. And so you can see the top there, some duct tape teachers, as well as Mr. Jar got duct taped to the wall, and there's a teacher down in the corner.
No, they stood on a crate and they duct taped them and they pulled the crate out.
Yeah, it was, students were super excited and motivated.
Super excited.
I remember
And
they
so
did
they
it
ended
at
up
Chambers
raising
one year.
a whopping $2,331 to donate to the American Red Cross support of Western wildfire relief. So hats off to them. That's fantastic. So lots of generosity from the community and great sports of the duct taped teachers. So very exciting. And then the middle school wanted to share that they really looked hard at their club structure. They really wanted to bring some normalcy back to the middle school. And so in the past they have run clubs, but with the lack of Tiger Time is when clubs have run in the past. And so they really wanted to bring that back for this school year. And so they just wanted to highlight a few of the clubs that they have up and running once again. So the Tiger Pride Club promotes school spirit. And so because there are not fun nights this year, they are doing some other things. This year it's Fun Focus Friday. So they're planning activities that students can do, still working within all the guidelines that we have for safety and security for students this year, but still doing some fun. FFA is up and running this year and still doing some fantastic activities like the Food for America program with 4th grade students, but it's virtual this year. But I just love all the creativity of people working around the barriers that we have, but still doing some great things for students. Student Council is up and running as well. They didn't get to have spring elections last year, so they now have done some of that. They're not able to do some of the activities that they've done in the past, but 8th grade does have an executive board that has made some adjustments to different things, and they are working on a penny board to benefit Project Christmas, so that is exciting as well. Yearbook is up and running, and so students are helping with the design of the cover and different student photographs and those kinds of things. The Vex Robotics Club is up and running. Students are designing, building, and testing robots, hoping that a competition will still happen, which they're all still full steam ahead. So there's a couple teams, 3-4 teams at the middle school level, and then there's an elementary team that Mrs. Rausch oversees as well. And so they are excited. There's going to be a virtual competition, and right now there's scheduled to be an in-person competition as well. And then Skills USA is also up and running. That is the Technology and Engineering Club. And so they are doing several different things. There's a CO2 car, robotics, and welding, so different levels of competition there. So they were striving to bring some normalcy back to the middle school experience with those wonderful clubs. And then I will quickly switch to the high school. So lots of great work happening at the high school. Mr. Chambers and Mr. Solheim wanted to give a hats off to the activities director, Jay Weinman, and the Pep Club advisor, Dan Anderson, and the Interact Club, the student part of Rotary, as they've all collaborated on a Spirit Week for next week. And so that is in place of the traditional homecoming. But they have some great activities planned. There's some decoration contests, a socially distanced assembly that will be taking place next Thursday. And then the Rotary Club and the Student Interact Club and the High School Pep Club have all collaborated on a community-wide Halloween fundraiser. So the task is to message photos and videos to the Rotary Club of people in their Halloween costumes. So not just students, but anyone around the community. And then you have the opportunity to win chamber box. And so they're going to post entries as they receive them. And they're really excited about that. Entries will be screened prior to posting, but I think they're going to be on social media in a variety of ways. And they're also having a Scare Away Hunger food drive, where you can drop off food at different locations that will be announced soon in a contactless drop-off method. So they're excited about that as well.
Thank you.
All right. That's all I have.
Any questions?
It's good because I don't know if I'd be able to answer them.
Well, they would be available to answer, so that'd be okay. Okay, move on to WASB. Thanks for everyone for participating in the regional meeting, and just reminder of the Joint Education Convention, which should be very interesting this year. And Shelley's on the WASDA board too, so it's a joint effort with WASBO too and WASB, so we'll look forward to that. I continue, as you heard John say last, that I'm on the Equity, Diversity, and Social Justice Committee for WASB, and that's also going to be a joint effort with all of the other educational entities. No conferences or workshops going on to report on? Okay. Future agenda items. Just reminder about next Monday is the annual meeting at the Lunda Theater. Any other agenda items for the future? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, Mary Jo and Amy. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.